I'll do better, I say, then instantly regret the declaration because I am probably not going to be back for dinner tonight, either. Tomorrow. I'll start doing better tomorrow. Faithless creature, Oriana says, looking at me as though through the sheer intensity of her gaze she might ferret out my secrets. You're scheming. I am so tired of her suspicion, so very tired. You always think that, I say. It's just that for once you're right, leaving her to worry what that might mean. I go down the stairs and out onto the grass. This time, there's no one in my way, no one to make me reconsider what I am about to do. I don't bring the toad this time, I am more careful. As I walk through the woods, I see an owl circling overhead. I pull the hood of my cape to cover my face. At Hollow Hall, I stow my cloak outside between the logs of a woodpile and enter through the kitchens, where supper is being prepared. Squabs are lacquered with rose jelly, the smell of their crackling skin enough to make my mouth water and my stomach clench. I open a cabinet and am greeted by a dozen candles, all of them the color of buffed leather and accented with a gold stamp of Balakin's personal crest, 3 laughing black birds. I take out 9 candles and, trying to move as mechanically as possible, carry them past the guards. One guard gives me an odd look. I am sure there is something off about me, but he's seen my face before, and I am more sure-footed than last time. At least until I see Balakin coming down the stairs. He glances in my direction, and it is all I can do to keep my head down, my step even. I carry the candles into the room in front of me, which turns out to be the library. To my immense relief, he doesn't seem to truly see me. My heart is speeding, though, my breath's coming too fast. The servant girl who was cleaning the grate in Carden's room is blurrily putting books back onto the shelves. She is as I remember her, cracked lips, thin, and bruise-eyed. Her movements are slow, as if the air were as thick as water. In her drugged dream, I am no more interesting than the furniture and of less consequence. I scan the shelves impatiently, but I can see nothing useful. I need to get up to the tower, to go through all of Prince Balakin's correspondence and hope I find something to do with Locke's mother Ordain or the coronation, something I overlooked. But I can't do anything with Balakin between me and the stairs. I look at the girl again. I wonder what her life is like here, what she dreams of. If she ever, for a moment, had a chance to get away. At least, thanks to the gears, if Balakin did catch me, this could not be my fate. I wait, counting to 1,000, while piling my candles on a chair. Then I look out. Thankfully, Balakin is gone. Quickly, I head up the stairs toward the tower. I hold my breath as I pass Carden's door, but luck is with me. It is shut tight. Then I am up the stairs and into Balakin's study. I note the herbs in the jars around the room, herbs I see with new eyes. A few are poisonous, but most are just narcotic. Nowhere do I see blusher mushrooms. I go to his desk and wipe my hands against the rough cloth of my dress, trying to leave no trace of sweat, trying to memorize the pattern of papers. There are 2 letters from Murdoch, but they just seem to be about which knights will be at the coronation and in what pattern around the central dais. There are others that seem to be about assignations, about revels and parties and debauches. Nothing about blusher mushrooms, nothing about poisons at all. Nothing about liriope or murder. The only thing that seems even a little surprising is a bit of doggerel, a love poem in Prince Dane's hand, about a woman who remains unidentified, except by her sunrise hair and starlit eyes. Worse, nothing I can find tells me anything about a plan to move against Prince Dane. If Balakin is going to murder his brother, he's smart enough not to leave evidence lying around. Even the letter about the blusher mushroom is gone. I have risked coming to Hollow Hall for nothing. For a moment, I just stand there, trying to corral my thoughts. I need to leave without drawing attention to myself. A messenger. I will disguise myself as a messenger. Messages run in and out of estates all the time. I take a blank sheet of paper and scroll Murdoch on one side, then seal the other with wax. The sulfur of the match hangs in the air for a moment. As it dissipates, I descend the steps, faked message in hand. When I pass the library, I hesitate. The girl is still inside, mechanically lifting books from a pile and placing them on shelves. She will keep doing that until she's told to do something else, until she collapses, until she fades away, unremembered. As if she were nothing. I cannot leave her here. I don't have anything to go back to in the mortal world, but she might. And yes, it's a betrayal of Prince Dane's faith in me, a betrayal of fairy itself. I know that. But all the same, I can't leave her. There is a kind of relief in realizing it. I walk into the library, setting down the note on a table. She does not turn, does not react at all. I reach into my pocket and cup a little salt in the center of my palm. I hold it out to her, the way I would if I were coaxing a horse with sugar. Eat this, I tell her in a low voice. She turns toward me, although her gaze doesn't focus. I'm not allowed, she says, voice rough with disuse. No salt. You're not supposed to. I clap my hand over her mouth, some of the salt tipping out onto the ground, the rest pressed against her lips. I am an idiot. An impulsive idiot. Locking my arm around her, I drag her deeper into the library. She's alternating between trying to shout and trying to bite me. She keeps scratching at my arms, her nails digging into my skin. I hold her there, against the wall, until she sags, until the fight goes out of her. I'm sorry, I whisper as I hold on. I'm winging it. I don't want to hurt you. I want to save you. Please, let me do this. Let me save you. Finally, she has been still long enough that I take a chance and pull my hand away. She's panting, breath's coming fast. She doesn't scream, though, which seems like a good sign. We're getting out of here, I tell her. You can trust me. She gives me a look of blank incomprehension. Just act like everything's normal. I pull her to her feet and realize the impossibility of what I'm asking. Her eyes are rolling in her head like a mad pony. I don't know how long we have until she completely loses it. Still, there is nothing for me to do but march her out of Hollow Hall as fast as I can. I stick my head into the main chamber. It's still empty, so I drag her from the library. She's looking around as though she's seeing the heavy wooden staircase and the gallery above for the first time. Then I remember I left my fake note on the table in the library. Hold on, I say. I have to go back, and she makes a plaintive sound and pulls against my grip. I drag her along with me anyway and grab the message. I crumple it up and stuff it into my pocket. It's useless now, when the guards could recall it and connect a servant girl's disappearance to the household of the person who stole her. What's your? The girl shakes her head. You must remember it, I insist. It's terrible that instead of being sympathetic, I am annoyed. Buck up, I think. Stop feeling your feelings. Let's go. Sophie, she says in a kind of sob. Tears are starting in her eyes. I feel worse and worse still for how cruel I am about to be. You're not allowed to cry, I tell her as harshly as I can, hoping my tone will scare her into listening. I try my best to sound like Murdoch, to sound as if I am used to having my commands obeyed. You must not cry. I will slap you if I have to. She cringes but subsides into silence. I wipe her eyes with the back of my hand. Okay. I ask her. When she doesn't answer, I figure there's no more point in conversation. I steer her toward the kitchens. We'll have to pass by guards, there's no other way out. She has pasted on a horrible rictus of a smile, but at least she has enough self-possession for that. More worrying is the way she can't stop staring at things. As we walk toward the guards, the intensity of her gaze is impossible to disguise. I improvise, trying to sound as though I am reciting a memorized message, without inflection in the words. Prince Carden says we are to attend him. One of the guards turns to the other. Balakin won't like that. I try not to react, but it's hard. I just stand there and wait. If they lunge at us, I am going to have to kill them. Very well, the first guard says. Go. But inform Carden that his brother demands he bring both of you back this time. I don't like the sound of that. The second guard glances over at Sophie and her wild eyes. What do you? I can feel her trembling beside me, her whole body shaking. I need to say something fast, before she does. Lord Carden told us to be more observant, I say, hoping that the plausible confusion of an ambiguous command will help to explain the way she's acting. Then I walk on with Sophie through the kitchens, past the human servants I am not saving, aware of the futility of my actions. Does helping one person really matter, on balance? Once I have power, I will find a way to help them all, I tell myself. And once Dane is in power, I will have power. I make sure to keep my movements slow. I let myself breathe only when we've finally stepped outside. And it turns out, even that's too soon. Carden is riding toward us on a tall, dappled grey horse. Behind him is a girl on a palfrey Nicasia. As soon as he gets inside, the guards will ask him about us. As soon as he gets inside, he will know something is wrong. If he doesn't see me, and no sooner than that. What would be the punishment for stealing a prince's servant? I don't know. A curse perhaps, such as being turned into a raven and forced to fly north and live for 7 times 7 years in an ice palace, or worse, no curse at all. An execution. It takes everything I've got not to break and run. It's not as though I think I could make it to the woods, especially not hauling a girl with me. He would ride us both down. Stop staring, I hiss at Sophie, harsher than I mean to. Look at your feet. Stop scolding me, she says, but at least she's not crying. I keep my head down and, looping her arm through mine, walk toward the woods. Out of the corner of my eye, I see Carden swing down from his saddle, black hair blown by the wind. He looks in my direction and pauses for a moment. I suck in my breath and don't run. I can't run. There is no thundering of hoofbeats, no racing to catch and punish us. To my immense relief, he seems to see only 2 servants heading toward the forest, perhaps to gather or berries or something. The closer we get to the edge of the woods, the more each step feels fraught. Then Sophie sinks to her knees, turning to look back at Balakin's manor. A keening sound comes from deep in her throat. No, she says, shaking her head. No, 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 no. No. This isn't real. This didn't happen. I jerk her up, digging my fingers into her armpit. Move, I say. Move or I will leave you here. Do you understand me? I will leave you, and Prince Carden will find you and drag you back inside. Cheating a glance back, I see him. He's off his horse and leading it to the stables. Nicasia still sits atop hers, her head tipped back, laughing at something he said. He's smiling, too, but it's not his usual sneer. He doesn't look like the wicked villain from a story. He looks like an inhuman boy out for a walk with his friend in the moonlight. Sophie staggers onward. We can't get caught now, not when we're so close. The moment when I cross into the pine needle-strewn woods, I let out an enormous breath. I keep her moving until we reach the stream. I make her walk through it, though the cold water and sucking mud slows us down. Any way of hiding our tracks is worth doing. Eventually, she sinks down on the bank and gives over to weeping. I watch her, wishing I knew what to do. Wishing I was a better, more sympathetic person, instead of being annoyed and worried that any delay is going to get us caught. I make myself sit on the remains of a termite-eaten log on the bank of the stream and let her cry, But when minutes have passed and her tears haven't stopped, I go over and kneel in the muddy grass. It's not far to my house, I say, trying to sound persuasive. Just a little more walking. Shut up, she shouts, lifting her hand toward me off. Frustration flares. I want to scream at her. I want to shake her. I bite my tongue and fist my hands to make myself stop. Okay, I say, taking a deep breath. This is happening fast, I know. But I really do want to help you. I can get you out of Fairy. Tonight. The girl is shaking her head again. I don't know, she says. I don't know. I was at Burning Man, and there was this guy who said he had this gig passing hors d'oeuvres for a rich weirdo in one of the air-conditioned tents. Just don't take anything, he told me. If you do, you'll have to serve me for 1,000 years. Her voice trails off, but now I see how she was trapped. It must have sounded like he was making a joke. She must have laughed, and he must have smiled. And then, whether she ate a single shrimp puff or pocketed some of the silverware, it would all be the same. It's okay, I say nonsensically. It's going to be okay. She looks at me and seems to see me for the first time, takes in that I am dressed like her, like a servant, but that there's something off about me. Who are you? What is this place? What happened to us? I asked for her name, so I guess I should give her mine. I'm Jude. I grew up here. One of my sisters, she can take you over the sea to the human town near here. From there, you can call someone to get you, or you can go to the police and they'll find your people. This is almost over. Sophie takes this in. Is this some kind of, what happened? I remember things, impossible things. And I wanted. No, I couldn't have wanted. Her voice trails off, and I don't know what to say. I cannot guess the end of her sentence. Please, just tell me this isn't real. I don't think I can live with any of this being real. She's looking around the forest, as though if she can prove it isn't magic, then nothing else is, either. Which is stupid. All forests are magic, come on, I say, because while I don't like the way she's talking, there's no point in lying for the sake of making her feel better. She's going to have to accept that she's been trapped in Fairy. It's not as if I have a boat to take her across the water, all I have are Vivi's ragwort steeds. Can you walk a little farther now? The faster she's back in the human world, the better. As I get closer to Madux, I remember my cloak, still bunched up and hidden in a woodpile outside Hollow Hall, and curse myself all over again. Leading Sophie to the stables, I seat her in an empty stall. She slumps on the hay. I think the glimpse of the giant toad undid the last of her trust in me. Here we are, I say with forced cheerfulness. I'm going inside to get my sister, and I want you to wait right here. Promise me. She gives me a terrible look. I can't do this. I can't face this. You have to. My voice comes out harsher than I intended. I stalk into the house and go up the steps as quickly as I can, hoping against hope that I don't run into anyone else on the way. I fling open the door to Vivienne's room without bothering to knock. Vivi, thankfully, is lying on her bed, writing a letter in green ink with drawings of hearts and stars and faces in the margins. She looks up when I come in, tossing back her hair. That's an interesting outfit you've got on. Did something really stupid, I say, out of breath. That makes her push herself up, sliding off the bed and onto her feet. What happened? I stole a human girl, a human servant, from Prince Balakin, and I need you to help me get her back to the mortal world before anyone finds out. As I say this, I realize all over again how ridiculous it was for me to do that, how risky, how foolish. He will just find another human willing to make a bad bargain. But Vivi doesn't chide me. Okay, let me put on my shoes. I thought you were going to tell me you'd killed someone. Why would you think that? I ask. She snorts as she searches around for boots. Her eyes meet mine as she does up the laces. Jude, you keep smiling a pleasant smile in front of Murdoch, but all I can see anymore is bared teeth. I am not sure what to say to that. She puts on a long, fur-trimmed green coat with frog clasps. Where is the girl? In the stables, I say. I'll take you. Vivi shakes her head. Absolutely not. You have to get out of those clothes. Put on a dress and go down to dinner and make sure you act like everything's normal. If someone comes to question you, tell them you've been in your room this whole time. No one saw me. I say. Vivi gives me her best fish-eyed look. No one. You're sure? I think of Carden, riding up as we made our escape, and of the guards whom I'd lied to. Probably no one, I amend. No one who noticed anything. If Carden had, he would never have let me get away. He would never have given up having that much power over me. Yeah, that's what I thought, she says, holding up a forbidding, long-fingered hand. Jude, it isn't safe. I'm going, I insist. The girl's name is Sophie, and she's really freaked out, Vivi snorts. I bet. I don't think she'll go with you. You look like one of them. Maybe I am more afraid of my nerve running out than anything else. I worry about the adrenaline ebbing out of my body, leaving me to face the mad thing I have done. But given Sophie's suspicion of me, I absolutely think that Vivi's cat eyes would be enough to send her over the edge. Because you are one of them. Are you telling me in case I forgot? Vivi asks. We've got to go, I say. And I am coming. We don't have time to debate this. Come, then, she says. Together, we go down the stairs, but as we are about to go out the door, she grabs my shoulder. You can't save our mother, you know. She's already dead. I feel as though she has slapped me. That's not, isn't it? She demands. Isn't that what you're doing? Tell me this girl isn't some standing for mom. Some surrogate. I want to help Sophie, I say, shrugging off her grip. Just Sophie. Outside, the moon is high in the sky, turning the leaves silver. Vivi goes out to pick a bouquet of ragwort stalks. Fine, then go get this Sophie. She is where I left her, hunched in the hay, rocking back and forth and talking softly to herself. I am relieved to see her, relieved she didn't run off and we weren't even now tracking her through the forest, relieved that someone from Balikin's household hadn't ferreted out her location and hauled her away. Okay, I say with forced cheerfulness. We're ready. Yes, she says, standing up. Her face is tear-stained, but she's no longer crying. She looks like she's in shock. It's going to be okay, I tell her again, but she doesn't answer. She follows me mutely out behind the stables, where Vivi is waiting, along with two raw-boned ponies with green eyes and lacy manes. Sophie looks at them and then at Vivi. She begins to back away, shaking her head. When I come near her, she backs away from me, too. No, 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 she says. Please, no. No more. No. It's only a very little bit of magic, Vivi says reasonably, but it's still coming from someone with lightly furred points on her ears and eyes that flash gold in the dark. Just a smidgen, and then you won't ever have to see another magical thing. You'll be back in the mortal world, the daylight world, the normal world. But this is the only way to get you there. We're going to fly. No, Sophie says, her voice coming out broken. Let's walk to the cliffside near here, I say. You'll be able to see the lights, maybe even a few boats. You'll feel better when you can see a destination. We don't have a lot of time, Vivi reminds me with a significant look. It's not far, I argue. I don't know what else to do. The only other choices I can think of are knocking her unconscious or asking Vivi to glamour her, both are terrible. And so we walk through the woods, ragwort steeds following. Sophie doesn't balk. The walk seems to calm her. She picks up rocks as we go, smooth stones that she dusts the dirt from and then puts in her pockets. Do you remember your life from before? I ask her. She nods and doesn't speak for a little while, but then she turns back to me. She gives a weird croaking laugh. I always wanted there to be magic, she says. Isn't that funny? I wanted there to be an Easter bunny and a Santa Claus. And Tinker Bell, I remember Tinker Bell. But I don't want it. I don't want it anymore. I know, I say. And I do. I have wished for many things over the years, but the first wish of my heart was that none of this was real. At the water's edge, Vivi mounts one of the steeds and puts Sophie up before her. I swing up onto the back of the other. Sophie gives the forest a trembling look and then glances over at me. She doesn't seem afraid. She seems as though maybe she's starting to believe that the worst is behind her. Hold on tight, Vivi says, and her steed kicks up off the cliff and into the air. Mine follows. The wild exhilaration of flying hits me, and I grin with familiar delight. Beneath us are the white-capped waves and ahead the shimmering lights of mortal towns, like a mysterious land strewn with stars. I glance over at Sophie, hoping to give her a reassuring smile. Sophie isn't looking at me, though. Her eyes are closed. And then, as I am watching, she tilts to one side, lets go of the steed's mane, and lets herself fall. Vivi grabs for her, but it's too late. She is plunging soundlessly through the night sky, toward the mirrored darkness of the sea. When she hits, there is barely even a splash. I cannot speak. Everything seems to slow around me. I think of Sophie's cracked lips, think of her saying, "Please, just tell me this isn't real." I don't think one can live with any of this being real. I think of the stones she filled her pockets with. I hadn't been listening. I hadn't wanted to hear her, I just wanted to save her. And now, because of me, she is dead. Chapter 18. I wake up groggy. I cried myself to sleep, and now my eyes are swollen and red, my head pounding. The whole previous night feels like a feverish, terrible nightmare. It doesn't seem possible that I snuck into Balakin's house and stole one of his servants. It seems even less possible that she preferred to drown than to live with the memories of Fairy. As I drink fennel tea and shrug on a doublet, Narebone comes to my door. "Your pardon," he says with a shonbo. "Jude must come immediately." Tatterfell waves him off. "She's not fit to see anyone right at the moment. I'll send her down when she's dressed." Prince Dane awaits her downstairs in General Madoc's parlor. He commanded me to fetch her and not to mind whatever state of dishabille she was in. He said to carry her if I had to. Narebone seems repentant at having to say that, but it's clear that none of us can refuse the Crown Prince. Cold dread coils in my stomach. How did I not think that he of all people, with his spies, would find out what I'd done? I wipe my hands against my velvet top. Despite his order, I pull on pants and boots before I go. No one stops me. I am vulnerable enough, I will keep what dignity I can. Prince Dane is standing near the window, behind Madoc's desk. His back is to me, and my gaze goes automatically to the sword hanging from his belt, visible beneath his heavy wool cloak. He does not turn when I come in. I have done wrong, I say. I am glad he stays where he is. It's easier to speak when he's not looking at me. And I will repent in whatever way he turns, his face full of a wild rage that makes me suddenly see his resemblance to Cardan. His hand comes down hard on Madoc's desk, rocking everything atop it. "Have I not taken you into my service and given you a great boon? Did I not promise you a place in my court? And yet, you use what I have taught you to endanger my plans." My gaze goes to the floor. He has the power to do anything to me. Anything. Not even Murdoch could stop him, nor do I think he would try. And not only have I disobeyed him, I have declared my loyalty to something completely separate from him. I have helped a mortal girl. I have acted like a mortal. I bite my bottom lip to keep from begging for his forgiveness. I cannot allow myself to speak. The boy wasn't as badly hurt as he might have been, but with the right knife, a longer knife, the strike would have been lethal. Do not think I don't know you were going for that worse strike. I look up, suddenly, too surprised to hide it. We look at each other for several uncomfortable moments. I stare into the silvered grey of his eyes, taking note of the way his brows furrow, forming deep, displeased lines. I note all this to avoid thinking of how I almost gave away an even greater crime than the one he's discovered. Well, he demands. Had you no plan for being found out? He tried to glamour me into jumping out of the tower, I say. And so he knows you can't be glamored. Worse and worse. He comes around the desk toward me. You are my creature, Jude Duet. You will strike only when I tell you to strike. Otherwise, stay your hand. Do you understand? No, I say automatically. What he's asking is ridiculous. Was I supposed to just let him hurt me? If he knew all the things I'd really done, he would be even angrier than he slams a dagger down on Murdoch's desk. Pick it up, he says, and I feel the compulsion of a glamour. My fingers close on the hilt. A kind of haziness comes over me. I both know and don't know what I am doing. In a moment, I am going to ask you to put the blade through your hand. When I ask you to do that, I want you to remember where your bones are, where your veins are. I want you to stab through your hand, doing the least damage possible. His voice is lulling, hypnotic, but my heart speeds anyway. Against my will, I aim the sharp point of the knife. I press it lightly against my skin. I am ready. I hate him, but I am ready. I hate him, and I hate myself. Now, he says, and the glamour releases me. I take a half step back. I am in control of myself again, still holding the knife. He was about to make, "Do not disappoint me," Prince Dane says. I realize all at once that I have not gotten a reprieve. He hasn't released me because he wants to spare me. He could glamour me again, but he won't, because he wants me to stab myself willingly. He wants me to prove my devotion, blood and bone. I hesitate, of course I hesitate. This is absurd. This is awful. This isn't how people show loyalty. This is epic, epic bullshit. Jude, he asks. I cannot tell if this is a test he expects me to pass or one he wants me to fail. I think of Sophie at the bottom of the sea, her pockets full of stones. I think of the satisfaction on Valerian's face when he told me to jump from the tower. I think of Carden's eyes, daring me to defy him. I have tried to be better than them, and I have failed. What could I become if I stopped worrying about death, about pain, about anything? If I stopped trying to belong? Instead of being afraid, I could become something to fear. My eyes on him, I slam the knife into my hand. The pain is a wave that rises higher and higher but never crashes. I make a sound low in my throat. I may not deserve punishment for this, but I deserve punishment. Dane's expression is odd, blank. He takes a step back from me, as though I am the one who did the shocking thing instead of merely doing what he ordered. Then he clears his throat. Do not reveal your skill with a blade, he says. Do not reveal your mastery over glamour. Do not reveal all that you can do. Show your power by appearing powerless. That is what I need from you. Yes, I gasp, and draw the blade out again. Blood runs over Murdoch's desk, more than I expect. I feel suddenly dizzy. Wipe it up, he says. His jaw is set. Whatever surprise he felt seems gone, replaced by something else. There is nothing to clean the desk with but the hem of my doublet. Now give me your hand. Reluctantly, I hold it out to him, but all he does is take it gently and wrap it in a green cloth from his pocket. I try to flex my fingers and nearly pass out from pain. The fabric of the makeshift bandage is already turning dark. Once I am gone, go to the kitchens and put moss on it. I nod again. I am not sure I can translate my thoughts into speech. I am afraid I am not going to be able to stand much longer, but I lock my knees and stare at the notch of chipped wood on Maddox's desk where the tip of the blade hit, stained a bright but fading red. The door to the study swings open, startling us both. Prince Dane drops my hand, and I shove it into my pocket, the pain of which nearly staggers me. Oriana stands there, a wooden tray in her hands with a steaming pot and 3 clay cups atop it. She is dressed in a day gown the vivid hue of unripe persimmons. Prince Dane, she says, making a pretty bow. The servants said you were sequestered with Jude, and I told them they had to be mistaken. Surely, with your coronation so close, your time is too valuable for a silly girl to take up so much of it. You do her too much credit, and no doubt the weight of your regard is quite overwhelming. No doubt, he says, giving her a tooth-gritting smile. I have tarried too long. Take some tea before you leave us, she says, putting down the tray on Maddox's desk. We could all have a cup and speak together. If Jude has done something to offend you. Your pardon, he says, not particularly kindly. But your reminder of my duties spurs me to immediate action. He brushes past Oriana, looking back at me once before stalking off. I have no idea whether I passed the test or not. But either way, he does not trust me as he once did. I have thrown that away. I don't trust him as much, either. Thank you, I say to Oriana. I am shivering all over. She doesn't scold me, for once. She doesn't say anything. Her hands come down lightly on my shoulders, and I lean against her. The scent of crushed verbena is in my nose. I close my eyes and drink in the familiar smell. I am desperate. I will take any comfort there is, any comfort at all. I do not think of lessons or lectures. Shaking all over, I go straight back to my room and climb into bed. Tatterfell strokes my hair briefly, as though I am a drowsy cat, and then returns to the task of sorting my dresses. My new gown is scheduled to arrive later today, and the coronation will begin the day after. Dane's being named as the High King will kick off a month of revelry, while the moon wanes and then swells anew. My hand hurts so much that I cannot bear to put moss on it. I just cradle it against my chest. It throbs, the pain coming in staggering pulses, like a second, ragged heartbeat. I cannot bring myself to do more than lie there and wait for it to ebb. My thoughts drift dizzily. Somewhere out there, all the lords and ladies and lieges ruling over far-flung courts are arriving to pay their respects to the new High King. Night courts and bright courts, free courts, and wild courts. The High King's subjects and the courts with which there are truces, however wobbly. Even Ola's court of the undersea will be in attendance. Many will pledge themselves to faithfully accept the new High King's judgment in exchange for his wisdom and protection. Pledge to defend him and avenge him, if need be. Then all will show their respect by partying their hardest. I'll be expected to party along with them. A month of dancing and feasting and boozing and riddling and dueling. For that, each of my best dresses must be dusted off, pressed, and refreshed. Tatterfell sews on cunning cuffs made from the scales of pinecones around the edges of frayed sleeves. Small tears in skirts are stitched over with embroidery in the shape of leaves and pomegranates and, on one, a cavorting fox. She has stitched dozens of leather slippers for me. I will be expected to dance so fiercely that I wear through a pair every night. At least Locke will be there to dance with me. I try to concentrate on the memory of his amber eyes instead of the pain in my hand. As Tatterfell moves around the room, my eyes close, and I fall into a strange, fitful sleep. When I wake, it's full night, and I am sweaty all over. I feel oddly calm, though, tears and panic and pain somehow smoothed over. The agony of my hand has turned into a dull throb. Tatafel is gone. Vivi is sitting at the end of my bed, her cat eyes catching moonlight and shining chartreuse. I came to see if you were well, she says. Except that of course you're not. I force myself to sit up again, using only one of my hands. I'm sorry what I asked you to do. I shouldn't have. I put you in danger. I am your elder sister, she says. You don't need to protect me from my own decisions. After Sophie plunged into the water, Vivi and I spent the hours until dawn diving into the icy sea, calling for Sophie, trying to find some trace of her. We swam under the black water and screamed her name until our throats were hoarse. Still, I say. Still, she echoes fiercely. I wanted to help. I wanted to help that girl. Too bad we didn't. The words catch in my throat. Vivienne shrugs, and I am reminded of how, despite her being my sister, we differ in ways that are hard to comprehend. You did a brave thing. Be glad of that. Not everyone can be brave. I'm not always. What do you mean? The whole not telling Heather what's really going on. She makes a face at me but smiles, clearly grateful I am speaking of something less dire, and yet both of our thoughts went from one dead mortal girl to her beloved, also mortal. We were lying in bed together a few days ago, Vivi says. And she started tracing the shape of my ear. I thought she was going to ask something that would give me an opening, but she just told me my ear. Modding was really good. Did you know there are mortals who cut human ears and sew them so they heal pointed? I am not surprised. I understand longing for ears like hers. I feel like I have spent half my life wanting them, with their delicate, furred points. What I do not say is this: no one could touch those ears and believe they were made by anything other than nature. Heather is either lying to Vivi or lying to herself. I don't want her to be afraid of me, Vivi says. I think of Sophie, and I am sure Vivi is thinking of her, too, pockets full of stones. Sophie at the bottom of the sea. Perhaps she is not so unaffected by what happens as she wants to seem. From downstairs, I hear Taryn's voice. They're here. Our dresses. Come look. Slipping off my bed, Vivi smiles at me. At least we had an adventure. And now we're going to have another one. I let her go ahead, as I need to cover my bandaged hand with a glove before I follow her down the stairs. I press a button, ripped from a coat, over the wound to divert direct pressure. Now I have to hope that the bulge on my palm isn't too noticeable. Our gowns have been spread out over 3 chairs and a sofa in Oriana's salon. Mudok is patiently listening to her rhapsodies over the perfection of their garments. Her ball gown is the exact pink of her eyes, deepening to red, and seems to be made of enormous petals that spread into a train. The fabric of Taryn's is gorgeous, the cut of her mantua and stomach are perfect. Beside them is Oak's sweet little suit of clothes, and there are a doublet and cape for Mudok in his favorite shade of crusted blood red. Vivi holds up her silvery grey dress, with its tattered edges, sparing a smile for me. Across the room, I see my gown. Taryn gasps when I lift it up. That's not what you ordered, she says, accusatory. As though somehow I have deliberately deceived her. It's true that the dress I am holding is not the one that Brambleweft sketched for me. It's something else entirely, something that reminds me of the mad, amazing garments that Locke's mother's closet was stuffed with. An ombre ball gown, its color deepening from white near my throat, through palest blue to deepest indigo at my feet. Over that is stitched the stark outlines of trees, the way I see them from my window as dusk is falling. The seamstress has even sewn on little crystal beads to represent stars. This is a dress I could never have imagined, one so perfect that for a moment, looking at it, I can think of nothing but its beauty. I don't think this is mine, I say. Taryn's right. It doesn't look anything like the sketches. It's still lovely, Oriana says consolingly, as though I am displeased. And it had your name pinned to it. I am glad no one is making me give it back. I do not know why I was given such a dress, but if there's any way I can fit into it, I will. Murdoch raises his brows. We will all look magnificent. When he walks past, departing the salon, he ruffles my hair. In moments like these, it is almost possible to think there is no river of spilled blood between us all. Oriana claps her hands together. Girls, come here for a moment. Attend. We three arrange ourselves on the couch beside her, waiting, puzzled. Tomorrow, you will be among the gentry from many different courts. You've been under Murdoch's protection, but that protection will be unknown to most of the folk in attendance. You must not allow yourselves to be lured into making bargains or promises that can be used against you. And, above all, give no insult that might excuse a trespass of hospitality. Do not be foolish, and do not put yourself in anyone's power. We are never foolish, Taryn says, a blatant lie if ever there was one. Oriana makes a pained face. I would keep you from the revels, but Murdoch has specifically instructed that you participate in them. So heed my advice. Be careful, and perhaps you will find ways to be pleasing. I should have expected this, more cautions, another lecture. If she does not trust us to behave at a revel, she certainly will not trust us at a coronation. We rise, dismissed, and she takes each of us in turn, pressing her chilly mouth against our cheeks. My kiss comes last. Do not aspire above your station, she says softly to me. For a moment, I don't understand why she would say that. Then, horrified, I get her meaning. After this afternoon, she thinks I am Prince Dane's lover. I'm not, I blurt out. Of course, Carden would say that everything I've got is above my station. She takes my hand, her expression pitying. I am only thinking of your future, Oriana says, voice still soft. Those close to the throne are seldom truly close to anyone else. A mortal girl would have even fewer allies. I, as though giving in to her wise advice. If she doesn't believe me, then the easiest thing is to go along with her. I guess it makes more sense than the truth, that Dane has selected me to be part of his nest of thieves and spies. Something about my expression causes her to catch both of my hands. He whines at the pressure on my wound. Before I was Murdoch's wife, I was one of the consorts to the King of Elfheim. Hear me, Jude. It is no easy thing to be the lover of the High King. It is to always be in danger. It is to always be a pawn. I must be gaping at her, as shocked as I am. I never wondered about her life before she came to us. Suddenly, Oriana's fears for us make a different kind of sense. She was used to playing by an entirely different set of rules. The floor seems to have tilted beneath my feet. I do not know the woman in front of me, do not know what she suffered before coming to this house, no longer even know how she really came to be Murdoch's wife. Did she love him, or was she making a clever marriage, to gain his protection? I didn't know, I say stupidly. I never gave Eldred a child, she tells me. But another of his lovers nearly did. When she died, rumor pointed to one of the princes poisoning her, just to prevent competition for the throne. Oriana watches my face with her pale pink eyes. I know she's talking about Liriope. You don't need to believe me. There are a dozen more rumors just as terrible. When there is a lot of power concentrated in one place, there are plenty of scraps to fight over. If the cow isn't busy drinking poison, then it's drinking bile. You wouldn't be well suited to it. What makes you think that? I ask, her words annoyingly close to Murdoch's when he dismissed my chances at knighthood. Maybe it would suit me just fine. Her fingers brush my face again, stroking back my hair. It should be a tender gesture, but it's an evaluating one instead. He must have loved your mother very much, she says. He's besotted with you girls. If I were him, I would have sent you away a long time ago. I don't doubt that. If you go to Prince Dane despite my warning, if he gets his ear on you, tell no one before you tell me. Swear it on your mother's grave. I feel her nails as her hand comes to rest against the back of my neck and wince. No one. Do you understand? I promise. This is one vow I should have no trouble keeping. I try to give the words weight, so she'll believe I mean it. Seriously. I promise. She releases me. You may go. Rest well, Jude. When you rise, the coronation will be upon us, and there will be little time left for resting. I curtsy and take my leave. In the hall, Taryn is waiting for me. She sits on a bench carved with coiled serpents and swings her feet. As the door closes, she looks up. What was going on with her? I shake my head, trying to rid myself of a jumble of feelings. Did you know she used to be the High King's consort? Taryn's eyebrows go up, and she snorts, delighted. No. Is that what she told you? Pretty much. I think of Locke's mother and the singing bird in the acorn, of Eldred on his throne, head bowed by his own crown. It is hard for me to picture him taking lovers, no less the quantity he must have taken to have so many children, an unnatural number for a fairy. And yet, perhaps that's just a failure of my imagination. Huh. Taryn looks as though she's having the same failure of imagination. She frowns, puzzling for a moment, then seems to remember what she'd waited to ask me. Do you know why Prince Balakin was here? He was here. I am not sure I can weather more surprises. Here, in the house. She nods. He arrived with Murdoch, and they were shut up in his office for hours. I wonder how long they arrived after Prince Dane's departure. Hopefully, long enough for Prince Dane not to overhear anything about a missing servant. My hand throbs whenever I move it, but I am just glad I can move it at all. I am not eager to face any more punishment. And yet Murdoch didn't seem angry with me just now when he saw me with my dress. He seemed normal, pleased even. Perhaps they were conferring about other things. Weird, I say to Taryn, because I am commanded not to tell her about being a spy and I cannot bring myself to tell her about Sophie. I am glad that the coronation is nearly here. I want it to come and sweep everything else away. That night, I drowse in my bed, fully dressed, waiting for the ghost. I have bagged out on lessons for 2 nights straight, the night of Locke's party and last night, searching the water for Sophie. He's bound to be annoyed when he comes. I put that as far out of my head as I can and concentrate on resting. Breathing in and out. When I first came to Fairy, I had trouble sleeping. You'd think I'd have had nightmares, but I don't remember many. My dreams struggled to rival the horror of my actual life. Instead, I couldn't calm down enough to rest. I would toss and turn all night and all morning, my heart racing, finally falling into a headachy sleep in the late afternoon, when the rest of Fairy was just rising. I took to wandering the corridors of the house like a restless spirit, thumbing through ancient books, moving around the game pieces on the fox and geese board, toasting cheese in the kitchens, and staring at Murdoch's blood-soaked cap, as though it contained the answers to the universe in its tide lines. One of the Hobbs who used to work here, Nelather, would find me and guide me back to my room, telling me that if I couldn't sleep, then I ought to just close my eyes and lie still. That at least my body could rest, even if my mind wouldn't. I am lying like that when I hear a rustling on the balcony. I turn, fully expecting to see the ghost. I am about to tease him for actually making a sound when I realize the person rattling the doors isn't the ghost at all. It's Valerian, and he has a long, curving knife in one hand and a smile every bit as sharp pulling at his mouth. What? I scramble into a sitting position. What are you doing here? I realize that I am whispering, as though I am afraid of his being discovered. You are my creature, Jude Duet. You will strike only when I tell you to strike. Otherwise, stay your hand. At least Prince Dane didn't glamour me to obey those orders. Why shouldn't I be here? Valerian asks me, striding closer. He smells like pine sap and burned hair, and there is a light dusting of golden powder streaked over one cheek. I am not sure where he's been before this, but I don't think he's sober. This is my home. I am prepared for training with the ghost. I have a knife in my boot and another at my hip, but thinking of Dane's command, thinking of how not to disappoint him further, I reach for neither. I flummoxed by Valerian's being here, in my room. He walks up to my bed. He's holding the knife well enough, but I can tell he's not particularly practiced with it. He is no general's son. None of this is your home, he tells me, voice shaking with anger. If Carden put you up to this, you should really rethink your relationship, I say, finally, now, afraid. By some miracle, my voice stays steady. Because if I scream, there are guards in the hall. They'll come. They've got big, pointy swords. Huge. Your friend is going to get you killed. Show your power by appearing powerless. He doesn't seem to be absorbing my words. His eyes are wild, red-rimmed, and not entirely focused on me. Do you know what he said when I told him you'd stabbed me? He told me it was no more than I deserved. That's impossible. Valerian must have misunderstood. Carden must have been mocking him for letting me under his guard. What did you expect? I ask him, trying to hide my surprise. I don't know if you noticed, but the guy is a real jerk. If Valerian wasn't sure he wanted to stab me before, he's sure now. With a leap, he slams the blade into the mattress as I roll out of the way and onto my feet. Goose feathers fly up when he draws back the blade, drifting through the air like snow. He scrambles to his feet as I pull out a dagger of my own. Do not reveal your skill with a blade. Do not reveal your mastery over glamour. Do not reveal all that you can do. Little did Prince Dane know that my real skill lies in pissing people off. Valerian advances on me again. He's intoxicated and furious and not all that well trained, but he's one of the folk, born with their cat reflexes and blessed with height that gives him better reach. My heart is hammering in my chest. I should scream for help. I should scream. I open my mouth, and he lunges at me. The scream comes out as a huff of breath as I lose my balance. My shoulder hits the floor hard as I roll again. I am practiced enough that despite my surprise, I kick his knife hand when he comes toward me. The blade skitters across the floor. Okay, I say, as though I am trying to calm us both down. Okay. He doesn't pause. Even though I am holding a knife, even though I've avoided his attacks twice and disarmed him, even though I've stabbed him once before, he grabs for my throat again. His fingers sink into the flesh of my neck, and I remember how it felt to have fruit jammed into my mouth, soft flesh parting against my teeth. I remember choking on nectar and pulp as the horrible bliss of the Evropil stole over me, robbing me of caring even that I was dying. He'd wanted to watch me die, wanted to watch me fight for breath the way I am fighting for it now. I look into his eyes and find the same expression there. You are nothing. You barely exist at all. Your only purpose is to create more of your kind before you die. He's wrong about me. I am going to make my Mayfly life count for something. I won't be afraid of him or of Prince Dane's censure. If I cannot be better than them, I will become so much worse. Despite his fingers against my windpipe, despite the way my vision has begun to go dark around the edges, I make sure of my strike before I drive my knife into his chest. Into his heart. Valerian rolls off me, making a gurgling sound. I suck in lungfuls of air. He tries to stand, sways, and falls back to his knees. Looking over at him dizzily, I see the hilt of my knife is sticking out of his chest. The red velvet of his doublet is turning a deeper, wetter red. He reaches for the blade as though to draw it out. Don't I say automatically, because that will only make the wound worse. I grab for anything nearby. There is a discarded petticoat on the floor that I can use to stanch the blood. He slides down onto his side, away from me, and sneers, although he can barely open his eyes. You've got to let me, I start. I curse you, Valerian whispers. I curse you. 3 times, I curse you. As you've murdered me, may your hands always be stained with, may death be your only companion. May you, he breaks off abruptly, coughing. When he stops, he doesn't stir. His eyes stay as they are, half-lidded, but the gleam has gone out of them. My wounded hand flies to cover my mouth in horror at the curse, as though to stop a scream, but I don't scream. I haven't screamed this whole time, and I am not going to start now, when there's nothing more to scream about. As minutes slip by, I just sit there beside Valerian, watching the skin of his face grow paler as the blood no longer pumps to it, watching his lips go a kind of greenish blue. He doesn't die very differently than mortals, although I am sure it would gall him to know that. He might have lived for 1,000 years, if it wasn't for me. My hand hurts worse than ever. I must have banged it in the fight. I look around and catch my own reflection in the mirror across the room, a human girl, hair tousled, eyes feverish, a pool of blood forming at her feet. The ghost is coming. He'd know what to do with a dead body. He has certainly killed people before. But Prince Dane is already angry with me just for stabbing the child of a well-favored member of his court. Killing that same child the night before Dane's coronation won't go over well. The last people I need to know about this are the Court of Shadows. No, I need to hide the body myself. I scan the room, hoping for inspiration, but the only place I can think of that will even conceal him temporarily is beneath my bed. I spread the petticoat next to Valerian's body and then roll him onto it. I feel a little queasy. His body is still warm. Ignoring that, I drag him over to the bed and push him and all the skins under, first with my hands and then with my feet. Only a smear of blood remains. I get the pitcher of water near the bedpan and splash some on the wooden planks of the floor and then some on my face. My good hand is shaking as I finish wiping up, and I sink to the floor, both hands in my hair. I am not okay. I am not okay. I am not okay. But when the ghost arrives on my balcony, he can't tell, and that's the important thing. Chait on 19 that night, the ghost shows me how to climb far higher than the landing where Taryn and I tarried the last time. We climb all the way up to the rafters above the great hall and perch on heavy wooden beams. They are coiled around with a lattice of roots, which sometimes form the shapes of cages, sometimes balconies, and sometimes what appear more like tight ropes. Beneath us, the preparations for the coronation go on. Blue velvet and hammered silver and braided gold tablecloths are rolled out, each one decorated with the House of Greenbriar's standard, a tree of flowers, thorns, and roots. Do you think things will be better after Prince Dane becomes the High King? I ask him. The ghost gives me a vague smile and shakes his head sadly. Things will be as they always are, he tells me. Only more so. I don't know what that means, but it's a fair enough answer that I figure I am unlikely to get more out of him. I think of Valerian's body under my bed. The folk do not rot the way mortals do. Sometimes their bodies grow over with lichen or bloom with mushrooms. I've heard stories about battlefields turning into green hills. I wish I could go back and find that he'd turned into mulch, but I doubt I will be that lucky. I shouldn't be thinking about his body, I should thinking about him. I should be worrying over more than getting caught. We walk across roots and beams, unnoticed, jumping silently high above swarms of liveried servants. I turn to the ghost, watching his calm face and the expert way he places each foot. I try to do the same. I try not to use my sore hand for anything more than balance. He seems to notice, but he doesn't ask. Maybe he already knows what happened. Now wait, he says as we settle onto a heavy beam. For anything in particular? I ask. I have word that a messenger is coming from Balakin's estate, disguised in the High King's livery, he says. We're to kill it before it enters the royal quarters. The ghost says this without particular emotion. I wonder how long he has worked for Dane. I wonder if Dane ever asked him to drive a knife through his palm, if he tested them all that way, or if that was a special test, just for mortals. Is the messenger going to assassinate Prince Dane? I ask. Let's not find out, he says. Below me, spun sugar creations are being finished off with high crystalline spires. Apples painted with nevermore are piled on the banquet tables in such quantity as to send half the court dreaming. I think of Carden's mouth, flaked with gold. Are you sure they are coming this way? I am, he says, and no more than that. So we wait, and I try not to fidget as minutes slide into hours, moving just enough to keep my muscles from stiffening. This is pan of my training, probably the aspect the ghost thinks is most essential, after slewfooting. He has told me again and again that most of being a killer and a thief is waiting. The hardest thing, according to him, is not letting your mind drift to other things. He seems to be right. Up here, watching the ebb and flow of the servants, my thoughts turn to the coronation, to the drowned girl, to Carden riding up on his horse as I fled Hollow Hall, to Valerian's frozen, dying smile. I wrench my thoughts back to the present. Beneath me, a creature with a long, hairless tail that drags in the dilt scuttles across the ground. For a moment, I think it is part of the kitchen staff. But the bag it carries is too filthy, and there is something subtly wrong with its livery. It isn't dressed like one of Balakin's servants, and neither is its uniform the same as the other palace staff. I glance over at the ghost. Good, he says. Now shoot. My hands feel sweaty as I draw out the miniature crossbow, seeking to steady it against my arm. I have grown up in a house of butchery. I have trained for this. My principal childhood memory is of bloodshed. I have killed already tonight. And yet, for a moment, I am not sure I can do it. You're no killer. I take a breath and loose the bolt. My arm spasms from the recoil. The creature topples over, a flailing arm sending a pyramid of golden apples spilling to the dirt. I press myself down against a thick cluster of roots, camouflaging myself as I've been taught. Servants scream, looking around for the shooter. Next to me, the ghost has a smile on the corner of his mouth. Was that your first? He asks me. And then when I look at him blankly, he clarifies. Have you ever killed anyone before? May death be your only companion. I shake my head, not trusting myself to speak the lie out loud convincingly. Sometimes mortals throw up. Or cry, he says, clearly pleased I am doing neither of those things. It shouldn't shame you. I feel fine, I say, taking a deep breath and fitting a new bolt into the bow. What I feel is a kind of nervous adrenaline-soaked readiness. I seem to have passed some kind of threshold. Before, I never knew how far I would go. Now I believe I have the answer. I will go as far as there is to go. I will go way too far. He raises both brows. You're good at this. Nice marksmanship and a stomach for violence. I am surprised. The ghost is not given to compliments. I have vowed to become worse than my rivals. 2 murders completed in a single night mark a descent I should be proud of. Murdoch could not have been more wrong about me. Most of the children of the gentry don't have the patience, he says. And they're not used to getting their hands dirty. I do not know what to say to that, with Valerian's curse fresh in my mind. Maybe there's something broken in me from watching my parents being murdered. Maybe my messed up life turned me into someone capable of doing messed up things. But another part of me wonders if I was raised by Murdoch in the family business of bloodshed. Am I like this because of what he did to my parents or because he was my parent? May your hands always be stained with blood. The ghost reaches out to grab my wrist, and before I can snatch it back, he points to the pale half-macnons at the base of my nails. Speaking of hands, I can see what you've been doing in the discoloration of your fingers. The blue cast. I can smell it in your sweat, too. You've been poisoning yourself. I swallow, and then, because there's no reason to deny it, I nod. VVHY. The thing I like about the ghost is that I can tell he's not asking to set me up for a lecture. He just seems curious. I am not sure how to explain it. Being mortal means I have to try harder. The ghost studies my face. Someone's really sold you a bill of goods. Plenty of mortals are better at plenty of stuff than the folk. Why do you think we steal them away? It takes me a moment to realize he's serious. So I could be. I can't finish the sentence. He snorts. Better than me. Don't press your luck. That's not what I was going to say, I protest, but he only grins. I look down. The body is still lying there. A few knights have gathered around it. As soon as they move the body, we will move, too. I just need to be able to vanquish my enemies. That's all. He looks surprised. Do you have a lot of enemies, then? I am sure he imagines me among the children of the gentry, with their soft hands and velvet skins. He thinks of little cruelties, small slights, minor snubs. Not many, I say, thinking of the lazy, hateful look Carden gave me by torchlight in the hedge maze. But they are quality when the knights finally bear the body away and no one is searching for us anymore. The ghost leads me across the roots again. We slip through corridors until he can get close enough to the messenger bag to light finger the papers inside. Up close, though, I realize something that chills my blood. The messenger was disguised. The creature is female, and while her tail is fake, her long parsnip nose is entirely real. She's one of Murdoch's spies. The ghost tucks the note into his jacket and doesn't unroll it until we're out in the woods, with only moonlight to see by. When he looks, though, his expression turns stony. He's gripping the paper so hard it's crinkling in his fingers. "What does it say?" I ask. He turns the page toward me. There, 6 words are scrawled: "Kill the bearer of this message." "What does that mean?" I ask, feeling sick. The ghost shakes his head. "It means that Balakin set us up. Come on. We need to go." He pulls me along into the shadows, and together we slink away. I do not tell the ghost that I thought she worked for Murdoch. Instead, I try to puzzle through things myself. But I have too few pieces. What does the murder of Liriope have to do with the coronation? What does Murdoch have to do with any of this? Could his spy have been a double agent, working for Balakin as well as Murdoch? If so, does that mean she was stealing information from my household? Someone is trying to distract us, the ghost says, while they set their trap. Be alert tomorrow. The ghost doesn't give me any more specific orders, doesn't even tell me to stop taking my tiny doses of poison. He doesn't direct me to do anything differently. He leads me home to catch scraps of sleep just after dawn. As we're about to part, I want to stop and throw myself on his mercy. I've done a terrible thing, I want to say. Help me with the body. Help me. But we all want stupid things. That doesn't mean we should have them. I bury Valerian near the stables, but outside the paddock, so that even the most carnivorous of Murdoch's sharp-toothed horses are unlikely to dig him up and gnaw on his bones. It's not easy to bury a body. It's especially not easy to bury a body without your whole household finding out. I must roll Valerian onto my balcony and hurl him into the brush below. Then, one-handed, I must drag him away from the house. I am straining and sweating by the time I get to a likely plot of dew-covered grass. Newly woken birds call to one another beneath the brightening sky for a moment. All I want to do is lie down myself. But I still have to dig. The next afternoon is a sleep-deprived blur of being painted and braided, corseted and cinched. 3 fat gold earrings run up the side of one of Mudok's green ears, and he wears long gold claws over his fingers. Oriana looks like a rose in bloom beside him, wearing a massive necklace of rough-cut green emeralds at her throat, large enough to nearly count as armor. In my room, I unwrap my hand. It looks worse than I had hoped, wet and sticking instead of scabbed over. Swollen. I finally take Dane's advice and get some moss from the kitchens, wash the wound, and rewrap it with my makeshift button brace. I wasn't planning to wear gloves to the coronation, but I don't have much choice. Hunting around in my drawers, I find a set in a dark blue silk and draw them on. I imagine Locke taking my hands tonight, imagine him sweeping me around the hill. I hope I can avoid flinching if he presses on my palm. I can never let him guess what happened to Valerian. No matter how much he likes me, he wouldn't like kissing the person who put his friend in the ground. My sisters and I pass one another in the hall as we dart around, grabbing stray things we need. Vivienne goes through my jewelry cabinet, finding nothing adequately matching her ghostly dress in her own. "You're actually coming with us," I say. Mudok will be stunned. I am wearing a choker to cover the bruises blooming on my throat where Valerian's fingers sank into my skin. When Vivi gets down on her knees to sun through a tangle of earrings, I have a terror that she will glance beneath my bed and see some smear of blood I have missed cleaning. I am so worried that I barely register her smile. "I like to keep everyone on their toes," she says. "Besides, I want to gossip with Princess Rhea and see the spectacle of so many rulers of fairy courts in one place. But most of all, I want to meet Tarin's mysterious suitor and see what Mudok makes of his proposal." "Do you have any idea who he is?" I ask. With everything that's happened, I had nearly forgotten about him. "Not even a guess." "Do you?" She finds what she is looking for, iridescent grey Labradorite drops given to me by Tarin for my 16th birthday, forged by a goblin tinker with whom she traded 3 kisses. In idle moments, I have turned over and over who might ask for her hand. I think of the way Cardan pulled her aside and made her cry. I think of Valerian's leer. Of the way she shoved me too hard when I teased her about Balakin, although I am almost certain it isn't him. My head swims, and I want to lie back down on the bed and close my eyes. Please, please let it be none of them. Let it be someone nice we don't know. I remind myself of what she said, "I think you would like him." Turning to Vivi, I am about to start making a list of safer possibilities when Mudok comes into the room. He's holding a slim silver-sheathed blade in one hand. "Vivienne," he says with a little dip of his head. "Could you give me a moment with Jude here?" "Sure, Daddy," she says with small, poisonous emphasis as she slips out with my earrings. He clears his throat a little awkwardly and holds the silver sword out to me. The guard and pommel are unadorned, elegantly shaped. The blade is etched along the fuller with a barely visible pattern of vines. "I have something I'd like you to wear tonight. It's a gift." I think I make a little gasp. "It's a really, really, really pretty sword. You've been training so diligently that I knew it should be yours. Its maker called it Nightfell, but of course you are welcome to call it anything you like or nothing at all. It's said to bring the wielder luck, but everyone says that about swords, don't they? It's something of a family heirloom." Oriana's words come back to me, "He's besotted with you girls. He must have loved your mother very much." "But what about Oak?" I blun out. What if he wants it? Mudok gives me a small smile. Do you want it? Yes, I say, unable to help myself. I pull it from its sheath, it comes as though made for my hand. The balance is perfect. Yes, of course I do. That's good, because this is your sword by right, forged for me by your father, just endured. He's the one who crafted it, the one who named it. It's your family heirloom. I am momentarily robbed of breath. I have never heard my father's name spoken aloud by Mudok before. We do not talk about the fact that he murdered my parents, we talk around it. We certainly don't talk about when they were alive. My father made this, I say carefully, to be sure. My father was here, in Fairy. Yes, for several years. I only have a few pieces of his. I found two, one for you and one for Tarin. He grimaces. This is where your mother met him. Then they ran away together, back to the mortal world. I take a shuddering breath, finding the courage to ask a question I have often wondered but never dared voice aloud. What were they like? I flinch as the words leave my mouth. I don't even know if I want him to tell me. Sometimes I just want to hate her. If I can hate her, then it won't be so bad that I love him. But, of course, she's still my mother. The only thing I can truly be angry with her for is being gone, and that's certainly not her fault. Mudok sits down on the goat-footed stool in front of my dressing table and stretches out his bad leg, looking for all the world as though he's about to tell me a bedtime story. She was clever, your mother. And young. After I brought her to Fairy, she drank and danced weeks away at a time. She was at the center of every revel. I could not always accompany her. There was a war in the east, an unseelie king with a lot of territory and no desire to bend his knee to the High King. But I drank in her happiness when I was here. She had a way of making everyone around her feel as though every impossible thing was possible. I suppose I put it down to her mortality, but I don't think I was being fair. It was something else. Her daring, perhaps. She never seemed cowed, not by any of the magic, not by anything. I thought he might be angry, but he obviously isn't. In fact, his voice holds a totally unexpected fondness. I sit down on the bench in front of my bed, holding onto my new silver sword for support. Your father was interesting. I imagine you think I didn't know him, but he came to my house, my old house, the one they burned down, many times. We drank honey wine in the gardens, the three of us. He loved swords, he said, from the time he was a child. When he was around your age, he persuaded his parents to allow him to build his first forge in their backyard. Instead of going to college, he found a master swordsmith to take him on as an apprentice. From there, he got himself introduced to an assistant curator in a museum. She snuck him in after hours, allowing him to see ancient swords up close and honing his craft. But then he heard about the kinds of blades that could be wrought only by the Fae, so he came looking for us. He was a master smith when he came here and even better when he left. But he couldn't resist bragging about stealing our secrets along with his bride. Eventually, the tale came to Balakin, who gave it to me. If my father had really talked with Mudok, he ought to have known better than to brag about stealing from him. But I have stood on the streets of the mortal world and felt how far it seems from Elfheim. As the years passed, his time in Fairy must have seemed like a distant dream. There is little good in me, Mudok says. But I owe you a debt, and I have sworn to do the best by you that I know how. I rise, crossing the room to put one gloved hand against the pallid green skin of his face. He closes his cat eyes. I cannot forgive him, but I cannot hate him, either. We stand like that for a long moment, then he looks up, takes my unbandaged hand, and kisses the back of it, mouth against cloth. After today, things will be different, he tells me. I will wait for you in the carriage. He leaves me. I hold my head. My thoughts will not focus. When I rise, though, I strap on my new sword. It is cold and solid in my hands, heavy as a promise. Chaiter 20 oak is in cricket green, dancing around in front of the carriage. Vivan he sees me, he runs over, wanting me to carry him, then he runs off to pet the horses before I can. He is a fairy child, with a fairy child's whims. Taryn is beautiful in her heavily embroidered dress, and Vivi radiant in soft violet grey with artfully sewn moths seeming to fly from her shoulder across her chest to gather in another group on one side of her waist. I realize how rarely I've seen her in truly splendid clothes. Her hair is up, and my earrings glitter in her lightly furred ears. Her cat eyes gleam in the half-light, twin to Maduk's. For once, that makes me smile. I take Taryn's hand with my undamaged one, and she squeezes it, hard. We grin at each other, conspirators for once. In the carriage, there is a hamper of things to eat, which was smart of someone, because none of us has remembered to eat enough all day. I remove a glove and eat 2 small rolls of bread so light and filled with air that they seem to dissolve on my tongue. At the center of each is a mass of honeyed raisins and nuts, their sweetness enough to bring tears to my eyes. Maduk passes me a slab of pale yellow cheese and a still bloody slice of juniper and pepper-crusted venison. We make quick work of the food. I spot Maduk's red cap, half in and half out of his front pocket. His version of a medal, I suppose, to be worn on state occasions. None of us really speaks. I do not know what the others dwell on, but abruptly, I realize I am going to have to dance. I am terrible at dancing, since I have no practice in it other than humiliating lessons at school, partnered with Taryn. I think of the ghost and the roach and the bomb, trying to safeguard Dane against whatever Balakin has planned. I wish I knew what to do, how to help them. Kill the bearer of this message. I look over at Maduk, drinking spiced wine. He seems entirely comfortable, totally unaware of, or unconcerned with, the loss of one of his spies. My heartbeat drums faster. I keep remembering not to wipe my hand on my skins for fear of smearing them with. Eventually, Oriana pulls out some handkerchiefs soaked in rose and mint water for us to wipe ourselves down with. This sets off a chase, with Oak trying to avoid being washed. There isn't far for him to run in the carriage, but he keeps it going longer than you'd think, stepping on all of us in the process. I am so distracted I don't even automatically brace when we go straight through the rock and into the palace. We're lurching to a stop before I even notice we've arrived. A footman opens the door, and I see the whole courtyard, filled with music and voices and merriment. And candles, forests of them, the wax melting to create an effect like termite-eaten wood. Candles rest atop tree branches, flames flickering with the whoosh of dresses sweeping below. They line the walls like sentries and clump in tight arrangements on stones, lighting up the hill. Ready? Taryn whispers to me. Yes, I say a little breathlessly. We pile out of the carriage. Oriana has a little silver leash she attaches to Oak's wrist, which strikes me as not the worst idea, although he whines and sits in the dirt in protest, like a cat. Vivienne looks around the courtyard. There's something feral in her gaze. Her nose flares. Are we supposed to present ourselves to the High King one last time, she asks Maduk. He gives a half shake of his head. No. We will be called forth when it is time to take our oaths. Until then, I must stand beside Prince Dane. The rest of you should go enjoy yourselves until the bells chime and Valmoran begins the ceremony. Then, come to the throne room to witness the coronation. I'd have you close to the dais, where my knights can look after you. I turn toward Oriana, expecting another speech about not getting into trouble or even a new speech about keeping my legs closed around royalty, but she is too busy pleading with Oak to get out of the road. Let's party, Vivi says, sweeping Taryn and me along with her. We escape into the crowd, and moments later, we are drowning in it. The palace of Elfheim is packed with bodies. The unallied wild fae, courtiers, and monarchs mingle together. Selkies from Queen Ola's Cown of the Undersea speak together in their own language, skins slung from their shoulders like capes. I spot the lord of the Cown of Termites, Reuben, who is said to have killed his own lover to win a throne. He stands near one of the long wrestle tables, and even in the cramped hall, there is space around him, as though no one dares get too close. His hair is the color of salt, his garments entirely black, and a deadly curved sword sits at his hip. Incongruously, beside him, a green-skinned pixie girl is dressed in what appears to be a pearl grey slip dress and heavy lace-up boots, obviously mortal clothes. And standing on either side of the pixie are two knights in his livery, one with scarlet hair braided into a crown on her head. Dulcamara, who lectured us on the crown. There are others, figures I have heard of in ballads. Rue Silver of New Avalon, who cut her island out of the California coast, is talking to the exiled older king's son, Severin, who might try to ally with the new High King or might join Lord Reuben's court. He's with a red-haired human boy about my age, which makes me pause to study them. Is the boy his servant? Is he enchanted? I can't tell just from the way he looks around the room, but when he sees me staring, he grins. I turn quickly away. As I do, the Selkies shift, and I spot someone else with them. Grey-skinned and blue-lipped, hair hanging around her sunken-eyed face. But despite all that, I recognize her. Sophie. I had heard stories about the merfolk of the undersea keeping drowned sailors, but I didn't believe them. When her mouth moves, I see that she has sharp teeth. A shudder ripples across my shoulders. I stumble along after Vivi and Tarin. When I look back, I don't see Sophie, and I am not entirely sure I didn't imagine her. We slide past a shagfoal and a bugchest. Everyone is laughing too loudly, dancing too fiercely. As I pass one reveler in a goblin mask, he lifts it and winks at me. It's the roach. Heard about the other night. Good work, he says. Now keep your eyes out for anything that seems amiss. If Balakin's going to move against Dane, he's going to do it before the ceremony starts. I say, pulling free of my sisters to tarry with him a moment. In a crowd this size, it's easy to be briefly lost. Good. Came to see Prince Dane win the crown with my own eyes. He reaches into his leaf-brown jacket and pulls out a silver flask, popping the top and taking a swig. Plus watching the gentry cavort and make fools out of themselves. He holds the flask out to me with one grey-green clawed hand. Even from there, I can smell whatever is inside, pungent and strong and a little swampy. I'm okay, I say, shaking my head. You sure are, he tells me, laughing, and then pulls down his mask again. I am left grinning after him as he sweeps away into the crowd. Just seeing him has filled me with a sense of finally belonging to this place. He and the ghost and the bomb are not precisely my friends, but they actually seem to like me, and I am not inclined to split hairs. I have a place with them and a purpose. Nrhere, have you been? Vivienne asks, grabbing hold of me. You need a leash like Oaks. Come on, we're going to dance. I eddy along with them. There's music everywhere, urging a lightness of step. They say the pull of fairy music is impossible to resist, which isn't quite true. What's impossible is to stop dancing once you've begun, so long as the music goes on. And it does, all night, one dance bleeding into the next, one song becoming another without a pause to catch your breath. It's exhilarating to be caught up in the music, to be swept away in the tide of it. Of course, Vivi, being one of them, can stop whenever she wants. She can also yank us out, so dancing with her is almost safe. Not that Vivi always remembers to do the safe thing. But really, I am the last person to judge anyone for that. We clasp hands and join the circle dance, leaping and laughing. The song feels as though it is calling my blood, moving it through my veins to the same ragged beat, with the same sweet chords. The circle breaks up, and somehow I am holding Locke's hands. He sweeps me around in a giddy whoosh. "You are very beautiful," he says. "Like a winter night." He smiles down at me with his fox eyes. His russet hair curls around his pointed ears. From one lobe, a golden earring dangles, catching the candlelight like a mirror. He's the one who's beautiful, a kind of breathless, inhuman beauty. "I'm glad you like the dress I manage. Tell me, could you love me?" he asks, seemingly out of nowhere. Of course. I laugh, not sure of the answer I am supposed to give. But the question is so oddly phrased that I can hardly deny him. I love my parents' murderer, I suppose I could love anyone. I'd like to love him. "I wonder," he says. "What would you do for me?" "I don't know what you mean." This riddling figure with flinty eyes isn't the Locke who stood on the rooftop of his estate and spoke so gently to me, or who chased me, laughing, through its halls. I am not quite sure who this Locke is, but he has put me entirely off balance. "Would you forswear a promise for me?" He is smiling at me as though he's teasing. "Vivat promise." He sweeps me around him, my leather slippers pirouetting over the packed earth in the distance. A piper begins to play. "Any promise," he says lightly, although it is no light thing he is asking. "I guess it depends," I say, because the real answer, a flat no, isn't what anyone wants to hear. "Do you love me enough to give me up?" I am sure my expression is stricken. He leans closer. "Isn't that a test of love?" I don't know," I say. All this must be leading up to some declaration on his pan, either of affection or of a lack of it. "Do you love me enough to weep over me?" The words are spoken against my neck. I can feel his breath, making the tiny hairs stand up, making me shudder with an odd combination of desire and discomfort. "You mean if you were hurt?" "I mean if I hung you." My skin prickles. I don't like this. But at least I know what to say. "If you hurt me, I wouldn't cry. I would hung you back." His step falters as we sweep over the floor. "I'm sure you'd," and then he breaks off speaking, looking behind him. I can barely think. My face is hot. I dread what he will say next. "Time to change partners," a voice says, and I look to see that it's the worst person possible, Carden. "Oh," he says to Locke. "Did I steal your line?" His tone is unfriendly, and as I turn his words over in my mind, they do little to comfort me. Locke relinquishes me to the youngest prince, as is expected out of deference. I see out of the corner of my eye that Taryn is watching us. She's standing frozen in the middle of the revel, looking lost, as fairies swarm around her, swinging their partners in dizzying spirals. I wonder if Carden bothered her before he bothered me. He takes my wounded hand in his. He's wearing black gloves, the leather warm even through the silk over my fingers, and a black suit of clothes. Raven feathers cover the upper half of his doublet, and his boots have excessively pointed metal toes that make me conscious of how easy it will be to kick me savagely once we've begun dancing. At his brow, he wears a crown of woven metal branches, cocked slightly askew. Dark silver paint streaks over his cheekbones, and black lines run along his lashes. The left one is smeared, as though he forgot about it and wiped his eye. "What do you want?" I ask him, forcing the words out. I am still thinking about Locke, still reeling from what he said and what he didn't. "Go ahead. Insult me." His eyebrows go up. "I don't take commands from mortals," he says with his customary cruel smile. "So you're going to say something nice?" "I don't think so. Fairies can't lie. I want to be angry, but what I feel right now is gratitude." My face is no longer flaming and my eyes aren't stinging. I am ready to fight, which is far better. though I am sure it's the last thing he meant. He did me an enormous favor when he whisked me away from Locke. His hand slides lower on my hip. I narrow my eyes at him. You really hate me, don't you? He asks, his smile growing. Almost as much as you hate me, I say, thinking of the page with my name scratched on it. Thinking of the way he looked at me when he was drunk in the hedge maze. The way he's looking at me now. He lets go of my hand. Until we spar again, he says, making a bow that I cannot help feel is nothing but mockery. I look after him as he weaves unsteadily through the crowd, not sure what to make of that conversation. Bells begin to ring, signaling the start of the ceremony. The musicians quiet their fiddles and harps. For a long moment, the hill is silent, listening, and then people move to their places. I push toward the front, where the rest of the gentry of the High King's Crown are assembling. I fear my family will be. Oriana is there already, standing beside one of Madoc's best knights and looking as though she wishes she could be anywhere else. Oak is off his leash and on Taryn's shoulders. She is whispering something to a laughing Locke. I stop moving. The crowd surges around me, but I am rooted to the spot as Taryn leans in and tucks a stray bit of hair behind Locke's ear. There is so much in that small gesture. I try to make myself believe it means nothing, but after the strange conversation we had, I can't. But Taryn has a lover, one who is going to ask for her hand tonight. And she knows that Locke and I are, whatever we are. Do you love me enough to give me up? Isn't that a test of love? Vivienne has come out of the crowd, cat eyes agleam, hair loose around her face. She takes Oak in her arms and swings him around and around until they both fall in a whoosh of Vivi's skirts. I should go over, but I don't. I can't face Taryn yet, not when I cannot get such a disloyal thought out of my head. Instead, I hang back, watching the royal family assemble on the dais. The High King is seated on his throne of woven branches, wearing the heavy circlet, looking out from his deeply lined face with alert bronze eyes, like those of an owl. Prince Dane sits on a humble wooden stool beside him, dressed in all white robes, his feet and hands bare. And behind the throne stands the rest of the royal family, Balakin and Eloin, Rhea and Silea. Even Tanio, Prince Dane's mother, is present, in a garment of shining gold. The only family member missing is Cardan. The High King Eldred stands, and the entire hill goes quiet. Long has been my rule, but I take my leave of you. His voice echoes through the hill. Rarely has he ever spoken this way, to a great assemblage of us, and I am struck both by the power of his voice and the frailness of his person. When first I felt the call to search out the land of promise, I believed it would pass. But I can resist it no longer. Today, I will be king no more, but wanderer. Although everyone here must know this was what we've gathered for, still there are cries from all around me. A sprite begins to weep into the hair of a goat-headed Fuka. The Count Poet and Seneschal, Valmoran, steps from the side of the dais. He is stooped, spindly, his long hair full of sticks, with a scald crow perched on one shoulder. He leans heavily on a staff of smooth wood that has begun to bud at the very top, as though it were still alive. He is rumored to have been lured away from the mortal lands to Eldred's bed in his youth. I wonder what he will do now, without his king. We are loath to let you go, my lord, he says, and the words seem to take on a special, bittersweet resonance coming from his mouth. Eldred cups his hands, and the branches of the throne shudder and begin to grow, sending up new green shoots to spiral into the air, leaves unfurling and flower buds bursting along the length of them. The roots of the ceiling begin to worm, lengthening like vines and crawling across the underside of the hill. There is a scent in the air, like a summer breeze, heavy with the promise of apples. Another will stand in my place. I ask of you, release me. The assembled folk speak as one, surprising me. We release you, they say, words echoing around me. The High King lets his heavy robe of state fall from his shoulders. It crumples on the stone in a jewel-encrusted pile. He takes the oak leaf crown from his own head. Already, he stands up straighter. There is an unnerving eagerness in him. Eldred has been the High King of Elfheim longer than the memories of many of the folk. He has always seemed ancient to me, but the years seem to fall from him along with the mantle of rule. And whom will you put in your stead, to be our High King? Valmoran asks. My thirdborn, my son Dane, says Eldred. Come forward, child. Prince Dane rises from his humble place on the stool. His mother removes the white cloth covering him, leaving him naked. I blink once. I am used to a certain amount of nakedness in Fairy, but not among the royal family. Standing next to the rest of them in their heavy brocade and embroidered magnificence, Hel looks exquisitely vulnerable. I wonder if he's cold. I think of my hurt hand and hope so. Will you accept? Valmoran asks. The scald crow on his shoulder lifts black-tipped wings and beats the air. I am not sure if that's supposed to be Pan of the ceremony. I will assume the burden and the honor of the crown, Dane says gravely, and in that moment, his nakedness becomes something else, some sign of power. I will have it. Unseelie Court, Night Host, come forward and anoint your prince, Valmoran says. A Bogan makes her hulking way to the raised dais. Her body is covered in thick golden hair, her arms long enough to drag on the ground if she didn't bend them. She looks strong enough to break Prince Dane in half. Around her waist she wears a skirt of patchwork furs, and in one massive hand she carries what looks like an inkpot. She paints his left arm with long spirals of clotting blood, paints it over his stomach, down his left leg. He does not flinch. When she is done, she steps back to admire her grisly handiwork and then gives a shallow bow to Eldred. Seelie Court, Twilight folk, come forward and anoint your prince, Valmoran says. A diminutive boy in a wrapper of what looks like birch bark, his wild hair sticking up at odd angles, walks to the dais. Small pale green wings sit on his back. When he anoints Dane's other side, he paints it in thick swaths of pollen, yellow as butter. Wild Fae, shy folk, come forward and anoint your prince, says Valmoran. It is a hob who comes forward this time, in a dapper little suit, carefully sewn. He carries with him a handful of mud, which he smears over the center of Prince Dane's chest, just above his heart. I finally spot Carden in the crowd, unsteady on his feet and with a wineskin in one hand. He appears to have gotten himself riotously drunk. I think of the smear of silver paint on his face and the way his hand had slid on my hip. I guess he was well on his way there when I saw him. I feel an immense, mean satisfaction that he is not standing with the royal family at the most important moment for the court in centuries. He's going to be in so much trouble. Nho will clothe him? Valmoran asks, and in turn, each of his sisters and then his mother bring him a white tunic and pants made from hide, a collar of gold, and high kidskin boots. He looks like a storybook king, one who will have a wise and just rule. I imagine the ghost in the rafters, and the roach in his mask, watching proudly. I feel some of that same pride, being sworn to him. But I cannot forget his words to me, you are my creature, Jude Duet. I touch my wounded hand to the hilt of my silver sword, the sword my father forged. After tonight, I will be the High King's spy and a true member of his court. I will lie to his enemies and, if that doesn't work, I will find a way to do something worse. And if he crosses me, well, then I will find a way around that, too. Valmoran brings the end of his staff down hard against the ground, and I feel the reverberation to my teeth. And who will crown him? Eldred wears an expression of pride. The crown gleams in his gnarled hands, glowing as if sunlight emanated from the metal itself. The guards are changing configuration subtly, perhaps preparing to escort Eldred out of the palace. There are more knights at the edges of the crowd than there were when the coronation ceremony began. The High King speaks. Come, Dane. Kneel before me. The Crown Prince bends down in front of his father and the assemblage. My gaze cuts to Tarin, who is still standing with Locke. Oriana has a protective hand around Oak, one of Madoc's lieutenants, bending to speak with her. He gestures toward a doorway, and she says something to Vivi and then starts toward it. Tarin and Locke follow. I grit my teeth and start to push my way through the crowd to them. I don't want to disgrace myself like Carden, by not being where I'm supposed to be. Valmoran's voice cuts through my thoughts. And will you, the folk of Elfheim, accept Prince Dane as your High King? The cry rose up from the crowd, in chirping voices and bellows, we will. My gaze goes to the knights surrounding the dais. In another life, I would have been one of them. But as my eyes rest there, I notice familiar faces. Madoc's best commanders. Warriors who are fiercely loyal. They are not dressed in their uniforms. Over shining armor, they wear the Greenbrier livery. Perhaps Madoc is only being careful, only putting his best people in place. But the spy I killed, the one with the taunting message, was Madoc's as well. And Oriana, Oak, and my sisters are gone. Escorted out of the hill by one of Madoc's lieutenants just as the dais became more heavily guarded. I have a plan to ensure our futures. I need to find the roach. I need to find the ghost. I need to tell them that something's wrong. A well-seasoned strategist waits for the right opportunity. I push past a trio of goblins and a troll and one of the still folk. A Spriggan growls at me, but I don't pay any mind. The end of the coronation is in sight. I see goblets and tankards being refilled. Up on the dais, Balakin has left his place with the other princes and princesses. For a moment, I think it's Pan of the ceremony, until he draws a long, thin blade, one I recognize from his horrible duel with Carden. I stop moving. Brother Prince Dane admonishes. I will not accept you, Balakin says. I have come to challenge you for the crown. All around the dais, I see knights unsheathing blades. But neither Eloin nor Eldred, nor any of the rest of them, not Valmoran nor Tanio nor Rhea, is equipped. Only Cylia pulls out a knife from her bodice, the blade too small to be of much use. I want to draw my own sword, but everyone is pressed in too tightly. Balakin Eldred says sternly. Child. The High Court cannot be like the lower courts. We have no blood inheritance. No duel with your brother will induce me to place a crown on your unworthy head. Content yourself with my choice. Do not humiliate yourself before all of Faerie. This ought only be between us, Balakin says to Dane, not acknowledging that his father had even spoken. There is no High Monarch now. There is no one but us and a crown. I need not fight you, Dane says, gesturing out toward the knights grouped thickly around the dais, waiting for an order. Madoc is among them, but I am not close enough to see more than that. And you are not worthy of even that much regard. Then have this on your conscience. Balakin walks 2 steps and thrusts out his arm. He doesn't even look in the direction he's thrusting, but his blade pierces Eloin's throat. Someone shrieks, then everyone does. For a moment, the wound is just a blotch against her skin, and then blood pours out, a river of red. She staggers forward, going to her hands and knees. Gold fabric and glittering gems are drowning in scarlet. It was a mere flick of Balakin's blade, an almost nonchalant gesture. Eldred's hand comes up. I think he means to conjure up the same magic that made the roots grow, made the branches of the throne bloom and twine. But that power is gone, he gave it up with his kingdom. Instead, the newly budded flowers of the throne brown and wither. The crow on Valmoran's shoulder takes to wing, cawing as it flies toward the roots hanging down from the hollow roof of the hill. Guards, Dane says, in a voice that expects to be obeyed. None of their knights advance toward the dais, though. As one, they turn so their backs are to the royal family and their swords to the assemblage. They are allowing this to happen, allowing Balakin to stage his coup. But I cannot believe that this is Marduk's plan. Dane is his friend. Dane campaigned with him. Dane is going to reward him once he's the High King. The crowd surges, carrying me with it. Everyone is moving, pushing forward or away from the gruesome tableau. I see the salt-haired king of the court of termites to wade toward the fight, but his own knights get in front of him, holding him back. My family is gone. I look around for Carden, but he is lost in the crowd. It is all happening so fast. Celia has run to the High King's side. She has her small knife, barely long enough to be a weapon, but she holds it bravely. Tanio crouches over Eloin's body, trying to stem the tide of blood with the skins of her dress. "What do you say now, father?" Balakin demands. "Brother." Two bolts fly from the shadows, thudding into Balakin's side. He staggers forward. The cloth of his doublet appears ripped, a gleam of metal underneath. Armor. I scan the rafters for the ghost. I am an agent of the prince as surely as he is. It's my duty to get to Dane. I shove forward again. In my head I can see a vision of the future, like a story I am telling myself, a clear, shining narrative to contrast with the chaos around me. Somehow, I will get to the prince and defend him against Balakin's treachery until the loyal members of his guard reach us. I will be the hero, the one who put herself between the traitors and her king. Marduk gets there before I do. For a brief moment, I am relieved. His commander's loyalty might be bought, but Marduk would never. Then Marduk thrusts his sword through Dane's chest with such force that the blade emerges on the other side. He drags it up, through his rib cage, to his heart. I stop moving and let the crowd flow around me. I am still as stone. I see a flash of white bone, of wet red muscle. Prince Dane, who was almost the High King, falls on top of the gem-crusted red cloak of state, his spilling blood lost in the jumble of jewels. "Traitors," Eldred whispers, but his voice is amplified by the space. The word feels as though it rings through the hall. Marduk pauses and then sets his jaw, as though he is doing some grim duty. He is wearing his red cap now, the one I saw sticking out of his pocket, the one I have studied in its case. Tonight he will freshen it. There will be new tide lines. But I cannot believe he is doing this on anyone's orders. He must have allied with Balakin, misdirected Dane's spies. Put his own commanders in place, to keep the royal family isolated from anyone who would help them. Urged Balakin to orchestrate a strike at the one time no one would expect it. Even figured out that the only way not to trigger the crown's death curse was to move when it rested on no one's head. Knowing him as I do, I am sure he planned this coup. Marduk has betrayed Eldred, and Dane is gone, taking all my hopes and plans with him. Coronations are a time when many things are possible. Balakin looks insufferably satisfied with himself. "Give me the crown." Eldred drops the circlet from his hand. It rolls a little ways across the floor. "Take it yourself if it's what you so desire." Celia is making a terrible keening sound. Rhea stares at the crowd in horror. Valmoran stands beside Eldred, his narrow poet's face pale. With the knights circling it, the dais is like a terrible stage, where all the players are doomed to run through their roles to the same bloody end. Marduk's hands are gloved in red. I cannot stop staring at them. Balakin lifts the high crown. The golden oak leaves glitter with the light of candle flame. "You waited too long to depart the throne, father. You have become weak. You let traitors rule little fiefdoms, the power of the low courts goes unchecked, and the wild fae do as they like." Dane would have been the same, a coward who hid behind intrigues. But I am not afraid of bloodshed. Eldred does not speak. He makes no move toward the crown or toward a weapon. He simply waits. Balakin orders a knight to bring him Tanio. A female redcap in armor steps onto the dais to grab the struggling consort. Tanio's head lashes back and forth, her long black horns cutting into the redcap knight's shoulder. It doesn't matter. None of it matters. There are too many knights. Two more step von var, and there is no more struggling. Balakin draws himself up before his father. Declare me the High King, put the crown on my head, and you may go from this place, free and unharmed. My sisters will be protected. Your Conson will live. Otherwise, I will kill Tanio. I will kill her here in front of everyone, and they will all know that you allowed it. My gaze goes to Marduk, but he is on the steps, speaking in low tones to one of his commanders, a troll who has eaten at our table, has teased Oak and made him laugh. I laughed, too, then. Now my hands are shaking, my whole body trembling. Balakin, firstborn, no matter whose blood you spill, you will never rule Elfheim, Eldred says. You are unworthy of the crown. I close my eyes and think of Oriana's words to me, it is no easy thing to be the lover of the High King. It is to always be a pawn. Tanio goes to her death with grace. She is still. Her bearing is regal and doomed, as though she has already passed into the realm of ballads. Her fingers are laced together. She makes no sound as one of the knights, the red-capped knight with the slashed shoulder, beheads her with a single swift and brutal strike of her blade. Tanio's horned head rolls a short ways until it hits Dane's corpse. I feel something wet on my face, like rain. There are plenty of the folk who delight in murder and plenty more who delight in spectacle. A kind of giddy madness seems to come upon the crowd, a kind of hunger for even greater slaughter. I fear they may have a surfeit of satisfaction. Two of the knights have seized Eldred. I will not ask you again, Balakin says. But Eldred only laughs. He keeps laughing when Balakin runs him through. He doesn't fall like the others. Instead of blood pouring from his wound, red moths stream out, into the air. They rush out of him so quickly that in a moment, the High King's body is gone and there are just those red moths, swirling up into the air in a vast cloud, a tornado of soft wings. But whatever magic made them does not last. They begin to fall until they are scattered across the dais like blown leaves. The High King Eldred is, impossibly, dead. The dais is strewn with bodies and blood. Valmoran is on his knees. Sisters, Balakin says, striding toward them. Some of the arrogance is gone from his voice, replaced with a horrible softness. He sounds like a man in the midst of a terrible dream from which he refuses to wake. Which of you will crown me? Crown me and live. I think of Marduk telling my mother not to run. Celia steps forward, dropping her knife. She is dressed in a stomacher of gold and a skirt of blue, a circlet of berries in her loose hair. I will do it, she says. It is enough. I will make you the High King, although the stain of what you have done will forever taint your rule. Never is like forever, I think, and then am angry to be reminded of anything Carden has ever said, especially now. There's a part of me that is glad she has given in, despite the awfulness of Balakin, the inevitable horror of his rule. At least this is over. A bolt comes from the shadows of the rafters, in a completely different trajectory than the last. It strikes her in the chest. Her eyes go wide, her hands flutter over her heart, as though the wound is immodest and she needs to cover it. Then her eyes roll back, and she goes down without a sigh. It is Balakin who cries out with frustration. Marduk gives orders to his men, pointing toward the ceiling. A phalanx breaks off from the others and rushes up the stairs. A few guards fly up into the air on pale green wings, blades drawn. He killed her. The ghost killed her. I push my way blindly toward the dais, past Aslua howling for more blood. I don't know what I think I am going to do when I get there. Rhea picks up her sister's knife, holds it in one shaking hand. Her blue dress makes her look like a bird, caught before she could take flight. She's Vivi's only real friend in Fairy. "Are you really going to fight me, sister?" Balakin says. "You have neither sword nor armor." "Come, it is too late for that." "It is too late," she says, and brings the knife to her own throat, pressing the point just below her ear. "No!" I shout, although my voice is drowned out by the crowd, drowned out by Balakin shouting, too. And then, because I can't stand to see any more death, I close my eyes. I keep them closed through being jostled by something heavy and furred. Balakin starts calling for someone to find Carden, to bring him Carden, and my eyes automatically fly open. But there's no Carden in sight. Only Rhea's crumpled body and more horror. Winged archers take aim at the cluster of roots where the ghost was hiding. A moment later, he drops down into the crowd. I hold my breath, afraid he has been hit. But he rolls, stands, and takes off up the stairs, with guards hot on his heels. He has no chance. There are too many of them, and the bra is too packed, leaving nowhere to run. I want to help him, want to go to him, but I am hemmed in. I can do nothing. I can save no one. Balakin turns on the court poet, pointing at him. "You will crown me. Speak the words of the ceremony." "I cannot," Valmoran says. "I am no kin to you, no kin to the crown." "You will," Balakin says. "Yes, my liege," the court Pete answers in a quavering voice. He stumbles through a quick version of the coronation as the hill goes silent. But when the crowd is asked to accept Balakin as the new High King, no one speaks. The golden oak leaf crown is in Balakin's hand, but not yet on his head. Balakin's gaze sweeps over the audience, and though I know it will not settle on me, I still flinch. His voice booms. "Pledge yourselves to me." We do not. The monarchs do not bend their knees. The gentry are silent. The wild fairies watch and measure. I see Queen Annette of the Southmost. Unseelie Court, the court of moths, signal to her courtiers to leave the hall. She turns away with a sneer. "You are sworn to the High King," Balakin booms. "And I am king now." Balakin lifts the crown and sets it on his own head. But a moment later, he howls, knocking it off. A burn is on his brow, the red shadow of a circlet. "We do not swear to the king, but to the crown," someone cries. It is Lord Reuben of the Court of Termites. He has made his way to stand in front of the knights. And although there are more than a dozen directly between him and Balakin, Reuben does not seem particularly concerned. "You have 3 days to get it onto your head, Kinslayer. 3 days before I will depart here, unsworn, unchecked in power, and unimpressed. And I am certain not to be the only one." There is a smattering of laughter and whispers as his words spread. A motley group still fills the hall, glittering Seelie and terrifying Unseelie, the wild fae that seldom leave their hills, rivers, or grave mounds, goblins and hags, pixies and fukas. They have watched nearly all the royal family be slaughtered in a single night. I wonder how much more violence will spring up if there is no new monarch to caution them. I wonder who would welcome it. Sprites glitter in air that stinks of freshly spilled blood. The revel will go on, I realize. Everything will go on. But I am not sure that I can empty our bean ni wagen. Our /ml, or our a gleam, our and our apart, bam. _M Butler Yates.chaiter21 I am a child again, hiding under a table, with the revel spinning around above me. Pressing my hand to my heart, I feel the speeding thud of it. I cannot think. I cannot think. I cannot think. There is blood on my dress, little dots of it sinking into the blue sky. I thought I could not be shocked by death, but there was just so much of it. An embarrassing, ridiculous excess. My mind keeps going back over Prince Dane's white ribs, the spray of blood from Eloin's throat, and the High Kings denying Balakin over and over as he died. Over poor Tanio and Silia and Rhea, who were forced to discover, each in turn, how the crown of Fairy mattered more than their lives. I think of Murdoch, who had been at Dane's right hand all these years. Fairies might not be able to lie outright, but Murdoch had lied with every laugh, every clap on the back, every shared cup of wine. Murdoch, who'd let us all get dressed up and given me a beautiful sword to wear tonight, as though we were really going to some fun party. I knew what he was, I tried to tell myself. I saw the blood crusted on his red cap. If I let Missil forget, then more fool me. At least knights had led my family away before the killing started. At least none of the others had to watch, although, unless they were very far away, they could not have failed to hear the screams. At least Oak would not grow up as I have, with death as my birthright. I sit there until my heart slows again. I need to get out of the hill. This revel is going to turn wilder, and with no new High Monarch on the throne, there is little holding any of the revelers back from any entertainment they can devise. It's probably not the best time to be a mortal here. I try to remember looking down on the layout of the throne room from above with the ghost. I try to recall the entrances into the main pan of the castle. If I could find one of the guards and make them believe that I was part of Murdoch's household, they might take me to the rest of my family. But I don't want to go. I don't want to see Murdoch, covered in blood, sitting beside Balakin. I don't want to pretend that what happened is anything other than horrific. I don't want to disguise my disgust. There's another way out. I can crawl under the tables to the steps and go up them to the ledge near Murdoch's strategy room. I think from there I can climb directly through and be in the part of the castle most likely to be deserted, and the part with access to secret tunnels. From there, I can get out without worrying about knights or guards or anyone else. Adrenaline makes my whole body sing with the desire to move, but although what I have feels like a plan, it's not one yet. I can get out of the palace, but I have nowhere to go after that. Figure it out later, instinct urges. Okay, half a plan is good enough on my hands and knees, heedless of my dress, heedless of the way the sheath of my sword drags against the packed earth floor, heedless of the pain in my hand, I crawl. Above me I hear music. I hear other things, too, the snap of what might be bones, a whimper, a howl. I ignore all of it. Then the tablecloth lifts, and as my eyes adjust to the brightness of the candlelight, a masked figure grabs for my arm. There's no easy way to draw my sword, crouched as I am under a table, so I grab for the knife inside my bodice. I am about to strike when I recognize those ridiculous spike-tipped shoes. Cardan. The only one who can legitimately crown Balakin, the only other descendant of the Greenbrier line left. Everyone in Fairy must be looking for him, and here he is, wandering around in a flimsy silver fox half-mask, blinking at me with drunken confusion and swaying a bit on his feet. I almost laugh outright. Imagine my luck to be the one to find him. You're mortal, he informs me. In his other hand, he's carrying an empty goblet, tipped over absently, as though he's forgotten he still carries it. It's not safe for you here. Especially if you go around stabbing everyone. Not safe for me. Absurdity of the statement aside, I have no idea why he's acting as though he's ever thought about my safety for a moment, except to endanger it. I to remind myself he must be in shock and grieving, and that might make him behave strangely, but it's hard to think of him as a person who could care about anyone enough to mourn right now. He doesn't even seem to care about himself. Get down here before you're recognized playing hide-and-seek under the table. Crouching in the dirt. Typical of your kind, but far beneath my dignity. He laughs unsteadily, like he expects I am going to laugh, too. I don't. I ball up my fist and punch him in the stomach, right where I know it will hurt. He staggers to his knees. The goblet drops to the din, making a hollow clanking sound. "Ow!" he shouts, and lets me tug him under the table. "We'll get out of here without anyone noticing," I tell him. We stay under the tables and make our way to the steps to the upper levels of the palace. "And don't tell me it's beneath your dignity to crawl. You're so drunk you can barely stand anyway." I hear him snort. "If you insist," he says. It's too dark to see his expression, and even if it wasn't, he's masked. We make our way through the underside of the tables, with ballads and drinking songs sung above us, screams and whispers in the air, and the soft footfalls of dancers echoing around us like rain. My heart is hammering from the bloodshed, from Carden being so close, from striking him without consequences. I concentrate on him shuffling behind me. Everything smells of packed earth, spilled wine, and blood. I can feel my thoughts spiraling away, can feel myself stand to tremble. I bite the inside of my lip to give myself a fresh pain to focus on. I must keep it together. I can't lose it now, not where Carden will see. And not when a plan is starting to form in my mind. A plan requiring this last prince. I glance back and see that he has stopped moving. He's sitting on the ground, looking at his hand. Looking at his ring. He despised me. His voice sounds light, conversational. Like he's forgotten where he is. "Balakin?" I ask, thinking of what I saw at Hollow Hall. "My father." Carden snorts. "I didn't much know the others, my brothers and sisters. Isn't that funny? Prince Dane, he didn't want me in the palace, so he forced me out." I wait, not sure what to say. It's disturbing to see him like this, behaving as though he might have emotions. After a moment, he seems to come back to himself. His eyes focus on me, glittering in the dark. "And now they're all dead. Thanks to Marduk. Our honorable general. They never should have trusted him. But your mother discovered that a long time ago, didn't she?" I narrow my eyes. "Crawl." The corner of his mouth lifts. "You first." We go from table to table, until finally we're as close as we're likely to get to the steps. Carden pushes back the tablecloth and reaches out his hand toward me, in the gallant manner of someone helping up the person they've been trysting with. Maybe Carden would say he was doing it for the benefit of onlookers, but we both know he's mocking me. I stand without touching him. The only thing that matters is getting out of the hole before the revel gets bloodier, before the wrong creature decides I am an amusing plaything, before Carden is gutted by someone who doesn't want any high monarch in power. I start toward the steps, but he stops me. "Not like that. Your father's knights will recognize you." "I'm not the one they're looking for," I remind him. He frowns, although his mask hides most of it. Still, I can see it in the turn of his mouth. "If they see your face, they may pay too much attention to whom you're with." Annoyingly, he's right. If they knew me at all, they'd know I'd never be with you. Which is ridiculous, since I am currently standing beside him, although it makes me feel better to say it. With a sigh, I take down my braids, rubbing my hands through my hair until it hangs wild in my face. "You look," he says, and then trails off, blinking a few times, not seeming able to finish. I am guessing the hair thing worked better than he had expected. "Give me a second," I say, and I plunge into the crowd. I don't like risking this, but covering my face is safer than not. I spot a Nixie in a black velvet mask eating a tiny sparrow's heart off a long pin. Slifooting up behind her, I cut the ribbons and catch the mask before it hits the floor. She turns, searching for where it fell, but I am already away. Soon she will abandon looking and eat another delicacy, or at least I hope she will. It is just a mask, after all. When I return, Carden is swilling down more wine, his gaze burning into me. I have no idea what he sees, what he's even looking for. A thin rivulet of green liquid pours over his cheek. He reaches for the heavy silver pitcher as if to pour himself another cup. Come on, I say, grabbing for his gloved hand with mine. We're to the steps out of the hole when 3 knights move to block our way. Look elsewhere for your pleasure, one informs us. This is the way to the palace, and it is barred to common folk. I feel Carden stiffen beside me, because he's an idiot and cares more about being called common than anyone's safety, sadly even his own. I tug his arm. We will do as we are bid, I assure the knight, trying to move Carden away before he does something we will both regret. Carden, however, will not be moved. You are much mistaken in us. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. The hiking Balakin is a friend to my lady's court, Carden says, silver-tongued in his silver fox mask. He wears an easy half smile. He's speaking the language of privilege, speaking it with his drawling tone, with the looseness of his limbs, as though he thinks he owns everything he can see. Even drunk, he's convincing. You may have heard of Queen Glyton in the northwest. Balakin sent a message about the missing prince. He is waiting for an answer. I don't suppose you have any proof of that, one of the knights asks. Of course. Carden holds out a fisted hand and opens it to reveal a royal ring gleaming in the center of his palm. I have no idea when he took it off his finger, a neat bit of sleight of hand that I had no idea he could do, no less while inebriated. I was given this token so you would know me. At the sight of the ring, they step back. With an obnoxious, too charming smile, Carden grabs my arm and hauls me past them. Although I have to grit my teeth, I let him. We're on the steps, and it's because of him. Not about the mortal, one of the guards calls. Carden turns. Oh, well, you aren't entirely mistaken in me. I intended to keep some of the delights of the revel for myself, he says, and they all smirk. It is all I can do not to knock him to the ground, but there's no dispute he's clever with words. According to the Baroque rules that govern phaetons, everything he said was true enough, so long as you concentrate only on the words. Balakin is Madoc's friend, and I am part of Madoc's court, if you squint a little. So I am the lady. And the knights probably have heard of Queen Glyton, she's famous enough. I'm sure Balakin is waiting for an answer about the missing prince. He's probably desperate for one. And no one can claim that Carden's ring isn't meant to be a token by which he's known. As for what he wants to keep from the revel, it could be anything. Carden is clever, but it's not a nice kind of cleverness. And it's a little too close to my own propensity for lying to be comfortable. Still, we're free. Behind us, what should have been a celebration of a new hiking continues, the shrieking, the feasting, the whirling around in endless looping dances. I glance back once as we climb, taking in the sea of bodies and wings, ink drop eyes and sharp teeth. I shudder. We climb the steps together. I let him keep his possessive grip on my arm, guiding me. I let him open the doors with his own keys. I let him do whatever he wants. And then, once we're in the empty hall in the upper level of the palace, I turn and press the point of my knife directly underneath his chin. Jude, he asks, up against the wall, pronouncing my name carefully, as though to avoid slurring. I am not sure I have ever heard him use my actual name before. Surprised? I ask, a fierce grin starting on my face. The most important boy in Fairy and my enemy, finally in my power. It feels even better than I thought it would. You shouldn't be. Chaiter 22. I press the tip of the knife against his skin so he can feel the bite. His black eyes focus on me with new intensity. XVHY, he asks. Just that. Seldom have I felt such a rush of triumph. I have to concentrate on keeping it from going to my head, stronger than wine. Because your luck is terrible and mine is great. Do what I say and I'll delay the pleasure of hurting you. Planning to spill a little more royal blood tonight? He sneers, moving as if to shrug off the knife. I move with him, keeping it against his throat. He keeps talking. Feeling left out of the slaughter. You're drunk, I say. Oh, indeed. He leans his head back against the stone, closing his eyes. Nearby torchlight turns his black hair to bronze. But do you really believe I am going to let you parade me in front of the general, as though I am some lowly? I press the knife harder. He sucks in a breath and bites off the end of that sentence. Of course, he says, a moment later, with a laugh full of self-mockery. I was passed out cold while my family was murdered. It's hard to fall more lowly than that. Stop talking, I tell him, pushing aside any twinge of sympathy. He never had any for me. Move. Or what? He asks, still not opening his eyes. You're not really going to stab me? When was the last time you saw your dear friend Valerian? I whisper. Not today, despite the insult implied by his absence. Did you wonder at that? His eyes open. He looks as though I slapped him awake. I did. Where is rotting near Murdoch's stables? I killed him, and then I buried him. So believe me when I threaten you. No matter how unlikely it seems, you are the most important person in all of Fairy. Whosoever has you, has power. And I want power. I suppose you were right after all. He studies my face, giving nothing away on his own. I suppose I didn't know the least of what you could do. I try not to let him know how much his calmness rattles me. It makes me feel as though the knife in my hand, which should lend me authority, isn't enough. It makes me want to hurt him just to convince myself he can be frightened. He's just lost his whole family. I shouldn't be thinking like this. But I can't help thinking that he will exploit any pity on my part, any weakness. Time to move, I say harshly. Go to the first door and open it. When we're inside, we're going to the closet. There's a passageway through there. Yes, fine, he says, annoyed, trying to push my blade away. I hold it steady, so that the knife cuts into his skin. He swears and puts a bleeding finger in his mouth. What was that for? For fun, I say, and then ease the blade from his throat, slowly and deliberately. My lip curls, but otherwise I keep my expression as mask-like as I know how, as cruel and cold as the face that reoccurs in my nightmares. It is only as I do it that I realize who I am aping, whose face frightened me into wanting it for my own. My heart is hammering so hard I feel sick. Will you at least tell me where we're going? He asks as I shove him ahead of me with my free hand. No. Now move. The growl in my voice is all mine. Unbelievably, he does, swaying as he makes his way down the hall and then into the study I indicate. When we get to the hidden passageway, he crawls in with only a single inscrutable glance back at me. Maybe he's even drunker than I thought. It doesn't matter. He'll sober up soon enough. The first thing I do when I get to the nest of the Court of Shadows is tie Prince Carden to a chair with shredded pieces of my own dirty dress. Then I remove both of our masks. He lets me do it all, an odd look on his face. No one else is there, and I have no idea when anyone might come back, if they will at all. It doesn't matter. I can manage without them. I have made it this far, after all. When Carden found me, I knew that having control of him was the only path to having some control over the fate of my world. I think of all the vows I made to Dane, including the one I never spoke out loud. Instead of being afraid, I will become something to fear. If Dane isn't going to give me power, then I am going to take it for myself. Not having spent much time in the Court of Shadows, I don't know its secrets. I walk through rooms, opening heavy wooden doors, opening cabinets, taking inventory of my supplies. I discover a pantry that is as full of poisons as it is of cheeses and sausages, a training room with sawdust on the floor, weapons on the wall, and a new wooden dummy in the center, its face crudely painted with a disturbing grin. I go into the back room with 4 pallets on the ground and a few mugs and discarded clothing spread out near them. I touch none of it, until I come to the map room with a desk. Dane's desk, stuffed with scrolls and pens and sealing wax. For a moment, I am overwhelmed by the enormity of what has happened. Prince Dane is gone, gone forever. And his father and sisters are gone with him. I go back to the main room and drag Carden and the chair into Dane's office, propping it against the open door so I can keep an eye on him. I take down a handheld crossbow from the wall in the training room, along with a few bolts. Weapon beside me, cocked and ready, I sit down in Dane's chair and rest my head in my hands. Will you tell me where exactly we are, now that I am trussed up to your satisfaction? I want to strike Carden over and over until I slap that smugness off his face. But if I did, he'd know just how much he scares me. This is where Prince Dane's spies meet, I inform him, trying to shake off my fear. I need to concentrate. Carden is nothing, an instrument, a gambling marker. He fixes me with an odd, startled look. How do you know that? What possessed you to bring me here? I'm trying to figure out what to do next, I say with uncomfortable honesty. And if one of the spies returns, he asks me, rousing from his stupor enough to actually seem concerned. They're going to discover you in their lair and... He trails off at the smirk on my face and subsides into stunned silence. I can see the moment he arrives at the realization that I'm one of them. That I belong here. Carden lapses back into silence. Finally, I've made him flinch. I do something I would never dare to do before. I go through Prince Dane's desk. There are mounds of correspondence. Lists. Notes neither to Dane nor from him, probably stolen. More in his hand, movements, riddles, proposals for laws. Formal invitations. Informal and innocuous letters, including a few from Murdoch. I am not sure what I am looking for. I am just scanning everything as quickly as I can for something, anything, that might give me some idea of why he was betrayed. All my life, I grew up thinking of the High King and Prince Dane as our unquestioned rulers. I believed Murdoch to be entirely loyal to them. I was loyal, too. I knew Murdoch was bloodthirsty. I guess I knew he wanted more conquest, more war, more battle. But I thought he considered wanting war to be part of his role as the general, while part of the High King's role was to keep him in check. Murdoch talked about honor, about obligation, about duty. He'd raised Tarin and me in the name of those things. It seemed logical he was willing to put up with other unpleasantness. I didn't think Murdoch even liked Balakin. I recall the dead messenger, shot by me, and the note in the scroll, "Kill the bearer of this message." It was a piece of misdirection, all meant to keep Dane's spies busy chasing our tails while Balakin and Murdoch planned to strike in the one place no one looked, right out in the open. Did you know? I asked Carden. Did you know what Balakin was going to do? Is that why you weren't with the rest of your family? He barks out a laugh. If you think that, why do you suppose I didn't run straight into Balakin's loving arms? Tell me anyway, I say. I didn't know, he says. Did you? Murdoch is your father, after all. I take out a long bar of wax from Dane's desk, one end blackened. Expert, does it matter what I say? I could lie. Tell me anyway, he says, and yawns. I really want to slap him. I didn't know, either, I admit, not looking at him. Instead, I am staring at the pile of notes, at the soft wax impressions, an intaglio in reverse. And I should have. My gaze cuts toward Carden. I walk over to him, squat down, and begin to prise off his royal ring. He tries to pull his hand out of my grasp, but he's tied in such a way that he can't. I yank it off his finger. I hate how I feel around him, the irrational panic when I touch his skin. I'm just borrowing your stupid ring, I say. The signet fits perfectly into the impression on the letter. All the rings of all the princes and princesses must be identical. That means a seal from one looks much like the seal of another. I pull out a fresh piece of paper and begin to write. I don't suppose you have anything to drink around here? Carden asks. I don't imagine that whatever happens next is going to be particularly comfortable for me, and I would like to stay drunk in order to face it. Do you really think I care if you're comfortable? I demand. I hear a footfall and stand up from the desk. From the common room comes the sound of smashing glass. I shove Carden's ring into my bodice, where it rests heavily against my skin, and head into the hall. The roach has knocked a line of jars off the bookshelf and cracked the wood of a cabinet. Jagged glass and spilled infusions carpet the stone floor. Mandrake. Snake root. Larkspur. The ghost is grabbing the roach's arm, hauling him back from smashing more things. Despite the line of blood streaking down his leg, the stiffness of his movements. The ghost has been in a fight. Hey, I say. Both look surprised to see me. They are even more surprised when they notice Prince Carden tied to a chair in the doorway of the map room. Shouldn't you be with your father, celebrating? The ghost spits. I take a step back. Before, he's always been a model of perfect, unnatural calm. Neither of them seems calm now. The bomb is still out there, and both of them nearly gave their lives to free me from Balakin's dungeon, only to find you here, gloating. No. I say, holding my ground. Think about it. If I knew what was going to happen, if I was on Madoc's side, the only way I would be here is with a retainer of knights. You'd have been shot coming in the door. I would hardly have come alone, dragging along a prisoner that my father would dearly love to have. Peace, both of you. We're all of us reeling, the roach says, looking at the damage he has done. He shakes his head, then his attention goes to Carden. He walks toward him, studying the prince's face. The roach's black lips pull back from his teeth in a considering grimace. When he turns back to me, he's obviously impressed. Although it seems that one of us kept her head. Hello, Carden says, raising his brows and regarding the roach as though they were sitting down to tea together. Carden's clothes are disarranged, from crawling under tables or being captured and tied, and his infamous tail is showing under the white lawn of his shin. It is slim, nearly hairless, with a tuft of black fur at the tip. As I watch, the tail forms one wavering curve after another, snaking back and forth, betraying his cool face, telling its own story of uncertainty and fear. I can see why he hides that thing away. We should kill him, says the ghost, slouching in the hallway, light brown hair blown across his forehead. He's the only member of the royal family who can crown Balakin. Without Carden, the throne will be forever lost, and we will have avenged Dane. Carden draws a sharp breath and then lets it out slowly. I'd prefer to live. We don't work for Dane anymore, the roach reminds the ghost, the nostrils of his long green knife of a nose flaring. Dane's dead and beyond caring about thrones or crowns. We sell the prince back to Balakin for everything we can get and leave. Go among the low courts or the free folk. There's fun to be had, and gold. You could come along, Jude. If you want. The offer is tempting. Burn it all down. Run. Stand over in a place where no one knows me except the ghost and the roach. I don't want Balakin's money. The ghost spits on the ground. And other than that, the boy prince is useless to us. Too young, too weak. If not for Dane, then let's kill him for all of Fairy. Too young, too weak, too mean, I put in. Wait, Carden says. I have imagined him afraid many times, but the reality outstrips those imaginings. Seeing the quickening of his breath, the way he pulls against my careful knots, delights me. Wait. I could tell you what I know, everything I know, anything about Balakin, anything you'd like. If you want gold and riches, I could get them for you. I know the way to Balakin's treasury. I have the 10 keys to the 10 locks of the palace. I could be useful. Only in my dreams has Carden ever been like this, begging. Miserable. Powerless. Nut, did you know about your brother's plan? The ghost asks him, peeling himself off the wall. He limps over. Carden shakes his head. Only that Balakin despised Dane. I despised him as well. He was despicable. I didn't know he'd managed to convince Murdoch of that. What do you mean, despicable? I ask, indignant, even with the still healing wound on my hand. Dane's death washed away the resentment I had for Carden, gives me an indecipherable look. Dane poisoned his own child, still in the womb. He worked on our father until he trusted no one but Dane. Ask them, surely Dane's spies know how he made Eldred believe that Eloin was plotting against him, convinced him that Balakin was a fool. Dane orchestrated my being thrown out of the palace, so that I had to be taken in by my elder brother or go without any home at the court. He even persuaded Eldred to step down after poisoning his wine so that he became tired and ill. The curse on the crown doesn't prevent that. That can't be true. I think of Liriope, of the letter, of how Balakin wanted proof of who got the poison. But Eldred couldn't have been poisoned with blusher mushroom. Ask your friends, Carden says, with a nod to the roach and the ghost. It was one of them who administered the poison that killed the child and its mother. I shake my head, but the ghost doesn't meet my gaze. Why would Dane do that? Because he'd fathered the child with Eldred's consort and was afraid Eldred would find out and choose another of us for his heir. Carden seems pleased with himself at having surprised me, surprised us, from the looks on the faces of the roach and the ghost. I do not like the way they watch him now, as though he might have value after all. Even the King of Fairy doesn't like to think of his son taking his place in a lover's bed. It shouldn't shock me that the Count of Fairy is corrupt and kind of gross. I knew that, just as I knew Murdoch could do gruesome things to people he cared about. Just as I knew Dane was never kind. He made me stab my own hand, clean through. He took me on for my usefulness, nothing more. Fairy might be beautiful, but its beauty is like a golden stag's carcass, crawling with maggots beneath his hide, ready to burst. I feel sick from the smell of blood. It's on my dress, under my fingers, in my nose. How am I supposed to be worse than the folk? Sell the prince back to Balakin. I turn the idea over in my mind. Balakin would be in my debt. He'd make me a member of the court, just as I once wanted. He'd give me anything I asked for, any of the things Dane offered and more, land, knighthood, a love mark on my brow so all who looked upon me would be sick with desire, a sword that wove charms with every blow. And yet none of those things seems all that valuable anymore. None of those are true power. True power isn't granted. True power can't be taken away. I think of what it will be like to have Balakin for a high king, for the circle of grackles to devour all the other circles of influence. I think of his starveling servants, of his urging Carden to kill one of them for training, of the way he ordered Carden beaten while professing his love for their family. No, I cannot see myself serving Balakin. Prince Carden is my prisoner, I remind them, pacing back and forth. I'm not good at much, and I've been good at being a spy for only a very short time. I am not ready to give that up. I get to decide what happens to him. The roach and the ghost exchange glances. Unless we're going to fight, I say, because they're not my friends, and I need to remember that. But I have access to Murdoch. I have access to Balakin. I'm our best shot at brokering a deal. Jude Carden cautions me from the chair, but I am beyond caution, especially from him. There's a tense moment, but then the roach cracks a grin. No, girl, we're not fighting. If you've got a plan, then I'm glad of it. I'm not really much of a planner, unless it's how to prize out a gem from a nice setting. You stole the boy prince. This is your play, if you think you can make it. The ghost frowns but doesn't contradict him. What I must do is put the puzzle pieces together. Here's what doesn't make sense: why is Marduk backing Balakin? Balakin is cruel and volatile, two qualities not preferable in a monarch. Even if Marduk believes Balakin will give him the wars he wants, it seems as though he could have gotten those some other way. I think of the letter I found on Balakin's desk, the one to Nikasia's mother. One know the provenance of the blusher mushroom that you ask after. Why, after all this time, would Balakin want proof that Dane orchestrated Liriope's murder? And if he had it, why hadn't he taken it to Eldred? Unless he had and Eldred hadn't believed him. Or cared. Or unless the proof was for someone else. When was Liriope poisoned? I ask. 7 years ago, in the month of storms, the ghost says with a twist in his mouth. Dane told me that he'd been given a foresight about the child. Is this important, or are you just curious? What was the foresight? I ask. He shakes his head, as if he doesn't want the memory, but he answers. If the boy was born, Prince Dane would never be king. What a typical fairy prophecy, one that gives you a warning about what you'll lose but never promises you anything. The boy is dead, but Prince Dane will never be king. Let me not be that kind of fool, to base my strategies on riddles. So it's true, the roach says quietly. You're the one who killed her. The ghost's frown deepens. It didn't occur to me until then that they might not know one another's assignments. Both of them look uncomfortable. I wonder if the roach would have done it. I wonder what it means that the ghost did. When I look at him now, I don't know what I see. I'm going to go home, I say. I'll pretend I got lost at the coronation revel. I should be able to figure out what Carden is worth to them. I'll come back tomorrow and run the particulars by you both and the bomb, if she's here. Give me a day to see what I can do and your oath to make no decisions until then. If the bomb has better sense than we do, she's already gone to ground. The roach points to a cabinet. Wordlessly, the ghost goes and gets out a bottle, placing it on the worn wooden table. How do we know you won't betray us? Even if you think you're on our side now, you might get back to that stronghold of Marduk's and reconsider. I eye the roach and the ghost speculatively. I'll have to leave Carden in your care, which means trusting you. I promise not to betray you, and you promise that the prince will be here when I get back. Carden looks relieved at the idea that there will be a delay, whatever happens next. Or perhaps he's just relieved by the presence of the bottle. You could be a kingmaker, the ghost says. That's seductive. You could make Balakin even more deeply indebted to your father. He's not my father, I say sharply. And if I decide that I want to throw in with Marduk, well then, so long as you get paid, it won't matter, will it? I guess not, the ghost says grudgingly. But if you come back here with Marduk or anyone else, we'll kill Carden. And then we'll kill you. Understood? I nod. If it wasn't for Prince Dane's gears, they might have compelled me. Of course, whether Prince Dane's gears lasted past his death, I do not know and am afraid to find out. And if you take more than the day you asked for to get back, we'll kill him and cut our losses, the ghost continues. Prisoners are like dams and plums. The longer you keep them, the less valuable they become. Eventually, they spoil. One day and one night. Don't be late. Carden flinches and tries to catch my eye, but I ignore him. I'll agree to that, I say, because I am no fool. None of us is feeling all that trusting at the moment. So long as you swear Carden will be here and hail when I return tomorrow, alone. And because they are not fools, either, they swear it. Chaiter 23. I don't know what I expect to find when I get home. It's a long walk through the woods, longer because I give the encampments of the folk here for the coronation a wide berth. My dress is dirty and tattered at the hem, my feet are sore and cold. When I arrive, Mudok's estate looks the way it always does, familiar as my own step. I think of all the other dresses hanging in my closet, waiting to be worn, the slippers waiting to dance in. I think of the future I thought I was going to have and the one yawning in front of me like a chasm. In the hall, I see that there are more knights here than I am used to, coming in and out of Mudok's parlor. Servants rush back and forth, bringing tankards and inkpots and maps. Few spare me a look. There's a cry from across the hall. Vivienne. She and Oriana are in the parlor. Vivi runs toward me, throws her arms around me. I was going to kill him, she says. I was going to kill him if his stupid plan got you hurt. I realize I have not moved. I bring one hand up to touch her hair, let my fingers slip to her shoulder. I'm fine, I say. I just got swept up in the crowd. I'm fine. Everything's fine. Everything is, of course, not at all fine. But no one tries to contradict me. Where are the others? Oak is in bed, Oriana says. And Tarin is outside Mudok's study. She'll be along in a moment. Vivi's expression shifts at that, although I am not sure how to read it. I go up the stairs to my room, where I wash the paint off my face and the mud off my feet. Vivi follows me, perches on a stool. Her cat eyes are bright gold in the sunlight streaming in from my balcony. She doesn't speak as I take a comb to my hair, raking through the tangles. I dress myself in dark colors, in a deep blue tunic with a high collar and tight sleeves, in shiny black boots, with new gloves to cover my hands. I strap Nightfell onto a heavier belt and surreptitiously put the ring with the royal seal into my pocket. It feels so surreal to be in my room, with my stuffed animals and my books and my collection of poisons. With Carden's copy of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass sitting on my bedside table. A new wave of panic passes over me. I'm supposed to figure out how to turn the capture of the missing Prince of Fairy to my advantage. Here, in my childhood home, I want to laugh at my daring. Just who do I think I am? What happened to your throat? Vivi asks, frowning at me. And what's wrong with your left hand? I forgot how carefully I had concealed those injuries. They're not important, not with everything that happened. 4vh Why did he do it? You mean, why did Mudok help Balakin, she says, lowering her voice. I don't know. Politics. He doesn't care about murder. He doesn't care that it's his fault Princess Rhea is dead. He doesn't care, Jude. He's never cared. That's what makes him a monster. Mudok can't really want Balakin to rule Elfheim, I say. Balakin would influence how Fairy interacts with the mortal world for centuries, how much blood is shed, and whose. All of Fairy will be like Hollow Hall. That's when I hear Tarin's voice float up the stairwell. Locke has been in with Mudok for ages. He doesn't know anything about where Carden is hiding. Vivi goes still, watching my face. Jude, she says. Her voice is mostly breath. Mudok's probably just trying to frighten him, Oriana says. You know he's not keen on arranging a marriage in the middle of all this turmoil. Before Vivi can say anything else, before she can stop me, I've gone to the top of the stairs. I recall the words Locke said to me after I'd fought in the tournament and pissed off Carden, you're like a story that hasn't happened yet. I want to see what you will do. I want to be part of the unfolding of the tale. When he said that he wanted to see what I would do, did he mean to find out what would happen if he broke my heart? If I can't find a good enough story, I make one. Carden's words when I asked if he thought I didn't deserve Locke echo in my head. Oh no, he'd said with a smirk. You're perfect for each other. And at the coronation, time to change partners. Oh, Did I steal your line? He knew. How he must have laughed. How they all must have laughed. So I suppose I know who your lover is now, I call to my twin sister. Tarin looks up and blanches. I descend the stairs slowly, carefully. I wonder if, when Locke and his friends laughed, she laughed with them. All the odd looks, the tension in her voice when I talked about Locke, her concern about what he and I were doing in the stables, what we'd done at his house, all of it makes sudden, awful sense. I feel the sharp stab of betrayal. I draw Nightfell. I challenge you, I tell Tarin. To a duel. For my honor, which was grievously betrayed. Tarin's eyes widen. I wanted to tell you, she says. There were so many times I started to say something, but I just couldn't. Locke said if I could endure, it would be a test of love. I remember his words from the revel, do you love me enough to give me up? Isn't that a test of love? I guess she passed the test, and I failed. So he proposed to you, I say. While the royal family got butchered. That's so romantic. Oriana gives a little gasp, probably afraid that Murdoch would hear me, that he'd object to my characterization. Tarin looks a little pale, too. I suppose since none of them actually saw it, they could have been told nearly anything. One doesn't have to lie to deceive. My hand tightens on the hilt of Nightfell. What did Carden say that made you cry the day after we came back from the mortal world? I remember my hands buried in his velvet doublet, his back hitting the tree when I shoved him. And then later, how she denied it had anything to do with me. How she wouldn't tell me what it did have to do with. For a long moment, she doesn't answer. By her expression, I know she doesn't want to tell me the truth. It was about this, wasn't it? He knew. They all knew. I think of Nicasia sitting at Locke's dining table, seeming for a moment to take me into her confidence. He ruins things. That's what he likes. To ruin things. I thought she'd been talking about Carden. He said it was because of me that he kicked in onto your food, Tarin says, voice soft. Locke tricked them into thinking it was you who stole him away from Nicasia. So it was you they were punishing. Carden said you were suffering in my place and that if you knew why, you'd back down, but I couldn't tell you. For a long moment, I do nothing but take in her words. Then I throw my sword down between us. It clangs on the floor. Pick it up, I tell her. Tarin shakes her head. I don't want to fight you. You sure about that? I stand in front of her, in her face, annoyingly close. I can feel how much she itches to take my shoulders and shove. It must have galled her that I kissed Locke, that I slept in his bed. I think maybe you do. I think you'd love to hit me. And I know I want to hit you. There's a sword hung high on the wall over the hearth, beneath a silken banner with Murdoch's turned moon crest. I climb onto a nearby chair, step up onto the mantle, and lift it from its hook. It will do. I hop down and walk toward her, pointing steel at her heart. I'm out of practice, she says. I'm not. I close the distance between us. But you'll have the better sword, and you can strike the first blow. That's fair and more than fair. Tarin looks at me for a long moment, then picks up Nightfell. She steps back several paces and draws. Across the room, Oriana springs to her feet with a gasp. She doesn't come toward us, though. She doesn't stop us. There are so many broken things that I don't know how to fix. But I know how to fight. Don't be idiots. Vivi shouts from the balcony. I cannot give her much of my attention. I am too focused on Tarin as she moves across the floor. Murdoch taught us both, and he taught us well. She swings. I block her blow, our swords slamming together. The metal rings out, echoing through the room like a bell. Was it fun to deceive me? Did you like the feeling of having something over me? Did you like that he was flirting and kissing me and all the while promising you would be his wife? No. She parries my first series of blows with some effort, but her muscles remember technique. She bares her teeth. I hated it, but I'm not like you. I want to belong here. Defying them makes everything worse. You never asked me before you went against Prince Carden. Maybe he started it because of me, but you kept it going. You didn't care what it brought down on either of our heads. I had to show Locke I was different. A few of the servants have gathered to watch. I ignore them, ignore the soreness in my arms from digging a grave only a night before, ignore the sting of the wound through my palm. My blade slices Taryn's skirt, cutting nearly to her skin. Her eyes go wide, and she stumbles back. We trade a series of fast blows. She's breathing harder, not used to being pushed like this, but not backing down, either. I beat my blade against hers, not giving her time to do more than defend herself. So this was revenge. We used to spar when we were younger, with practice sticks. And since then we've engaged in hair pulling, shouting matches, and ignoring each other, but we've never fought like this, never with live steel. Taryn. Jude. Vivi yells, starting toward the spiral stair. Stop or I will stop you. You hate the folk. Taryn's eyes flash as she spins her sword in an elegant strike. You never cared about Locke. He was just another thing to take from Carden. That staggers me enough that she's able to get under my guard. Her blade just kisses my side before I whirl away. Out of her reach she goes on. You think I'm weak. You are weak, I tell her. You're weak and pathetic and I'm a mirror, she shouts. I'm the mirror you don't want to look at. I swing toward Taryn again, putting my whole weight into the strike. I am so angry, angry at so many things. I hate that I was stupid. I hate that I was tricked. Fury roars in my head, loud enough to drown out my every other thought. I swing my sword toward her side in a shining arc. I said stop, Vivi shouts, glamour shimmering in her voice like a net. Now, stop. Taryn seems to deflate, relaxing her arms, letting Nightfell hang limply from suddenly loose fingers. She has a vague smile on her face, as though she's listening to distant music. I try to check my swing, but it's too late. Instead, I let the sword go. Momentum sends it sailing across the room to slam into a bookshelf and knock a ram's skull to the ground. Momentum sends me sprawling on the Faulkner. I turn to Vivi, aghast. You had no right. The words tumble out of my mouth, ahead of the more important ones. I could have sliced Taryn in half. She looks as astonished as I am. Are you wearing a charm? I saw you change your clothes, and you didn't have one. Dane's gears. It outlasted his death. My knees feel raw. My hand is throbbing. My side stings where Nightfell grazed my skin. I am furious she stopped the fight. I am furious she tried to use magic on us. I push myself to my feet. My breath comes hard. There's sweat on my brow, and my limbs are shaking. Hands grab me from behind. 3 more servants pitch in, getting between us and grabbing my arms. 2 have Taryn, dragging her away from me. Vivi blows in Taryn's face, and she comes to sputtering awareness. That's when I see Murdoch outside his parlor, lieutenants and Nye crowded around him. And Locke. My stomach drops. What is wrong with you two? Murdoch shouts, as angry as I have ever seen him. Have we not already had a surfeit of death today? Which seems like a paradoxical thing to say since he was the cause of so much of it. Both of you will wait for me in the game room. All I can think of is him up on the dais, his blade cracking through Prince Dane's chest. I cannot meet his gaze. I am shaking all over. I want to scream. I want to run at him. I feel like a child again, a helpless child in a house of death. I want to do something, but I do nothing. He turns to Nebone. Go with them. Make sure they stay away from each other. I am led into the game room and sit on the floor with my head in my hands. Vive and I bring them away, they are wet with tears. I wipe my fingers quickly against my pants, before Tarin can see. We wait at least an hour. I don't say a single thing to Tarin, and she doesn't say anything to me, either. She sniffles a little, then wipes her nose and doesn't weep. I think of Carden tied to a chair to cheer myself. Then I think of the way he looked up at me through the curtain of his crow-black hair, of the curling edges of his drunken smile, and I don't feel in the least bit comforted. I feel exhausted and utterly, completely defeated. I hate Tarin, I hate Murdoch. I hate Locke. I hate Carden. I hate everyone. I just don't hate them enough. What did he give you? I asked Tarin, finally tiring of the silence. Murdoch gave me the sword Dad made. That's the one we were fighting with. He said he had something for you, too. She's quiet long enough that I don't think she's going to answer. A set of knives, for a table. Supposedly, they cut right through bone. The sword is better. It has a name. I guess you could name your steak knives. Meaty the Elder. Griselban, I say, and she makes a little snorting noise that sounds like the smothering of a laugh, but after that, we lapse back into silence. Finally, Murdoch enters the room, his shadow preceding him, spreading across the floor like a carpet. He tosses a scabbarded knifefell onto the ground in front of me, and then settles himself on a couch with legs in the shape of bird feet. The couch groans, unused to taking so much weight. Nebone nods at Murdoch and sees himself out. Tarin, I would talk with you of Locke, Murdoch says. Did you hurt him? There is a barely contained sob in her voice. Unkindly, I wonder if she's putting it on for Murdoch's benefit. He snorts, as though maybe he's wondering the same thing. When he asked for your hand, he told me that although, as I knew, the folk are changeable people, he'd still like to take you to wife, which is to mean, I suppose, that you will not find him particularly constant. He said nothing about a dalliance with Jude then, but when I asked a moment ago, he told me, mortal feelings are so volatile that it's impossible to help toying with them a little. He told me that you, Tarin, had shown him that you could be like us. No doubt whatever you did to show him that was the source of conflict between you and your sister. Tarin's dress is pillowed around her. She looks composed, although she has a shallow slash on her side and a cut skin. She looks like a lady of the gentry, if one does not stare overmuch at the rounded curves of her ears. When I allow myself to truly think on it, I cannot fault Locke for choosing her. I am violent. I've been poisoning myself for weeks. I am a killer and a liar and a spy. I get why he chose her. I just wish she had chosen me. What did you say to him? Tarin asks. That I have never found myself particularly changeable, Murdoch says. And that I found him to be unworthy of both of you. Tarin's hands curl into fists at her side, but there is no other sign that she's angry. She has mastered a kind of courtly composure that I have not. While I have studied under Murdoch, her tutor has been Oriana. Do you forbid me from accepting him? It will not end well, Murdoch says. But I will not stand in front of your happiness. I will not even stand in front of misery that you choose for yourself. Tarin says nothing, but the way she lets out her breath shows her relief. Go, he tells her. And no more fighting with your kin. Whatever pleasure you find with Locke, your loyalty is to your family. I wonder what he means by that, by loyalty. I thought he was loyal to Dane. I thought he was sworn to him. But she, Tarin begins, and Murdoch holds up a hand, with the menace of his curved black fingernails. Was the challenger. Did she thrust a sword into your hand and make you swing it? Do you really think that your sister has no honor, that she would cope you into pieces while you stood by, unarmed? Taryn glowers, putting her chin up. I didn't want to fight. Then you ought not do so in the future, Murdoch says. There's no point in fighting if you're not intending to win. You may go. Leave me to talk with your sister. Taryn stands and walks to the door. With her hand on the heavy brass latch, she turns back, as though to say something else. Whatever camaraderie we found when he wasn't there is gone. I can see in her face that she wants him to punish me and is half sure that he won't. You should ask Jude where Prince Carden is, she says, narrow-eyed. The last time I saw him, he was dancing with her. With that, she sweeps out the door, leaving me with a thundering heart and the royal seal burning in my pocket. She doesn't know. She's just being awful, just trying to get me in trouble with a parting shot. I cannot believe she would say that if she knew. Let's talk about your behavior tonight, says Murdoch, leaning forward. Let's talk about your behavior tonight, I return. He sighs and rubs one large hand over his face. You were there, weren't you? I tried to get you all out, so you wouldn't have to see it. I thought you loved Prince Dane, I say. I thought you were his friend. I loved him well enough, Murdoch says. Better than I will ever love Balakin, but there are others who have a claim on my loyalty. I think again of my puzzle pieces, of the answers I came back home to get. What could Balakin have given or promised Murdoch that would have persuaded him to move against Dane? Who? I demand. What could be worth this much death? Enough, he growls. You are not yet on my war council. You will know what there is to know in the fullness of time. Until then, let me assure you that although things are in disarray, my plans are not overturned. What I need now is the youngest prince. If you know where Carden is, I could get Balakin to offer you a handsome reward. A position in his court. And the hand of anyone you wanted. Or the still beating heart of anyone you despised. I look at him in surprise. You think I'd take Locke from Taryn? He shrugs. You seemed like you wanted to take Taryn's head from her shoulders. She played you false. I don't know what you might consider a fitting punishment. For a moment, we just look at each other. He's a monster, so if I want to do a very bad thing, he's not going to judge me for it. Much. If you want my advice, he says slowly, love doesn't grow well, fed on pain. Grant me that I know that at least. I love you, and I love Taryn, but I don't think she's suited for Locke. And I am. I cannot help thinking that Murdoch's idea of love doesn't seem like a very safe thing. He loved my mother. He loved Prince Dane. His love for us is likely to afford us no more protection than it afforded either of them. I don't think Locke is suited for you. He smiles his toothy smile. And if your sister is right and you do know where Prince Carden is, give him to me. He's a foppish son of boy, no good with a sword. He's charming, in a way, and clever, but nothing worth protecting. Too young, too weak, too mean. I think again of the coup that Murdoch had planned with Balakin, wondering how it was supposed to go. Kill the two elder siblings, the ones with influence. Then surely the High King would relent and put the crown on the head of the prince with the most power, the one with the military on his side. Perhaps grudgingly, but once threatened, Eldred would crown Balakin. Except he didn't. Balakin tried to force his hand, and then everyone died. Everyone but Carden. The board swept nearly clear of players. That can't be how Murdoch thought things would play out. But, still, I remember his lessons on strategy. Every outcome of a plan should lead to victory. No one can really plan for every variable, though. That's ridiculous. I thought you were supposed to lecture me about not sword fighting in the house, I say, trying to steer the conversation away from the whereabouts of Carden. I've gotten what I promised the Crown of Shadows, an offer. Now I just have to decide what to do with it. Must I tell you that if your blade had struck true and you'd hurt Tarin, you would have regretted it all your days? Of all the lessons I imparted to you, I would have thought that was the one I taught you best. His gaze is steady on mine. He's talking about my mother. He's talking about murdering my mother. I can say nothing to that. It is a shame you didn't take out that anger on someone more deserving. In times like these, the folk go missing. He gives me a significant look. Is he telling me it's okay to kill Locke? I wonder what he'd say if he knew I'd already killed one of the gentry. If I showed him the body. Apparently, maybe, congratulations. How do you sleep at night? I ask him. It's a crappy thing to say, and I am only saying it, I know, because he has shown me just how close I am to being everything I have despised in him. His eyebrows furrow, and he looks at me as though he's evaluating what sort of answer to give. I imagine myself as he must see me, a sullen girl sitting in judgment of him. Some are good with pipes or paint. Some have skill in love, he says finally. My talent is in making war. The only thing that has ever kept me awake was denying it. I nod slowly. He gets up. Think about what I've said, and then think about where your own talents lie. We both know what that means. We both know what I am good at, what I am. I just chased my sister around the downstairs with a sword. But what to do with that talent is the question. As I exit the game room, I realize that Balakin must have arrived with his retainers. Knights with his livery, 3 laughing birds emblazoned on their tabards, stand at attention in the hall. I slink past them and up the stairs, dragging my sword behind me, too exhausted to do anything else. I am hungry, I realize, but I feel too sick to eat. Is this what it is to be broken-hearted? I am not sure it is Locke I am sick over, so much as the world the way it was before the coronation began. But if I could undo the passing of the days, why not unwind them to before I killed Valerian? Why not unwind them until my parents are alive? Why not unwind them all the way to the beginning? There's a knock on my door, and then it opens without my signaling anything. Vivi comes in, carrying a wooden plate with a sandwich on it, along with a stop-it bottle of amber glass. I'm a jerk. I'm an idiot, I say. I admit it. You don't have to lecture me. I thought you were going to give me a hard time about the glamour, she says. You know, the one you resisted. You shouldn't magic your sisters. I draw the cork on the bottle and take a long swig of water. I didn't realize how thirsty I was. I guzzle more, nearly draining the whole container in one continuous gulping swallow, and you shouldn't try to chop yours in half. She settles back against my pillows, against my worn stuffed animals. Idly, she picks up the snake and flicks the forks of its felt tongue. I thought all of it, swordplay, knighthood, I thought it was a game. I remember how angry she was when Tarin and I gave in to Fairy and started having fun. Crowns of flowers on our heads, shooting bows and arrows at the sky. Eating candied violets and falling asleep with our heads pillowed on logs. We were children. Children can laugh all day and still cry themselves to sleep at night. But to hold a blade in my hand, a blade like the one that killed our parents, and think it was a toy, she'd have to believe I was heartless. It's not, I say finally. No, Vivi says, wrapping the stuffed snake around the stuffed cat. Did she tell you about him? I ask, climbing onto my bed next to her. It feels good to lie down, maybe a little too good. I am instantly drowsy. I didn't know Tarin was with Locke, Vivi says, deliberately giving me the whole sentence so I won't have to wonder if she's trying to trick me. But I don't want to talk about Locke. Forget him. I want us to leave Fairy. Tonight. That makes me sit upright. Note. She laughs at my reaction. It's such a normal sound, so completely out of step with the high drama of the last 2 days. I thought that would surprise you. Look, whatever happens next here, it's not going to good. Balakin's an asshole. And he's dumb on top of it. You should have heard Dad swearing on our way home. Let's just go. Not about Tarin. I ask. I've already asked her, and I'm not going to tell you if she agreed to come or not. I want you to answer for you. Jude, listen. I know you're keeping secrets. Something is making you sick. You're paler and thinner, and your eyes have a weird shine. I'm fine, I say. Liar, she says, but the accusation has no heat. I know that you're stuck here in Fairy because of me. I know that the shittiest things that have happened in your whole life are because of me. You've never said it, which is kind of you, but I know. You've had to turn yourself into something else, and you've done it. Sometimes, when I look at you, I'm not sure if you'd even know how to be human anymore. I don't know what to do with that, compliment and insult all at once. But behind it is a feeling of prophecy. You fit in better here than I do, Vivi says. But I bet it cost you something. I mostly don't like to imagine the life I could have had, the one without magic in it. The one where I went to a regular school and learned regular things. The one where I had a living father and mother. The one where my older sister was the weirdo. Where I wasn't so angry. Where my hands weren't stained with blood. I picture it now, and I feel strange, tense all over, my stomach churning. What I feel is panic. When the wolves come for that Jude, she'll be eaten up in an instant, and wolves always come. It frightens me to think of myself so vulnerable. But as I am now, I am well on my way to becoming one of the wolves. Whatever essential thing the other Jude has, whatever part that's unbroken in her and broken in me, that thing might be unrecoverable. Vivi is right, it cost me something to be the way I am. But I do not know what. And I don't know if I can get it back. I don't even know if I want it. But maybe I could try. What would we do in the mortal world? I ask her. Vivi smiles and pushes the plate with the sandwich toward me. Go to movies. Visit cities. Learn to drive a car. There are lots of the folk who don't live in the courts, don't play at politics. We could live any way we like. In a loft. In a tree. Whatever you want. With Heather. I pick up the food and take a huge bite. Sliced mutton and pickled dandelion greens. My stomach growls. Hopefully, she says. You can help me explain things to her. It occurs to me for the first time that, whether she knows it or not, she isn't suggesting running away to be human. She's suggesting we live like the wild fae, among mortals, but not of them. We'd steal the cream from their cups and the coins from their pockets. But we wouldn't settle down and get boring jobs. Or at least she wouldn't. I wonder what Heather is going to think of that. Once Prince Carden is dealt with in some way, then what? Even if I figure out the mystery of Balakin's letters, there's still no good place for me. The Court of Shadows will be disbanded. Tarin will be wed. Vivi will be gone. I could go with her. I could try to figure out what's broken in me, try to start over. I think of the Roach's offer, to go with them to another court. To start over in Fairy. Both feel like giving up, but what else is there to do? I thought that once I was home, I'd come up with a plan, but so far I haven't. I couldn't leave tonight, I say hesitatingly. She gasps, hand to her heart. You're seriously thinking about it? There are some things I need to finish. Give me a day. I keep bargaining for the same thing over and over, time. But in a day I will have squared things with the Court of Shadows. Arrangements will be made for Carden one way or another, everything will settled. I will wring whatever payment I can from Fairy. And if I still don't have a plan, it will be too late to make one. What's a single day in your eternal, everlasting, interminable life? One day to decide or one day to pack your bags. I take another bite of sandwich. Both. Vivi rolls her eyes. Just remember, in the mortal world, it won't be the way it is here. She goes to the door. You wouldn't have to be the way you are here. I hear Vivi's steps in the hall. I take another bite of my sandwich. I chew and swallow it, but I don't taste anything. What if the way I am is the way I am? What if, when everything else is different, I'm not? I take Carden's royal ring out of my pocket and hold it in the center of my palm. I shouldn't have this. Mortal hands shouldn't hold it. Even looking closely seems wrong, yet I do anyway. The gold is full of a deep rich redness, and the edges are smoothed by constant wear. There is a little bit of wax stuck in the impression, and I try to root it out with the edge of my nail. I wonder how much the ring would be worth out in the world. Before I can persuade myself not to, I slip it onto my unworthy finger.